That's what they make alfoil rolls out of, old swords,
I
and you know.
I did not
It's just
know
like
that.
how they used to like make paper out of mummies.
Yeah, it's totally. It's exactly what they do.
Yeah,
Well, you
they
read the
ran
finer
out.
print on your alfoil?
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Flux.
I'm Ben McKenzie.
Welcome to Pratchett, the monthly Terry Pratchett Book Club podcast.
Each month we discuss one of Terry Pratchett's books with a special guest.
This month we're talking about Interesting Times, or King Hong in Hong Kong.
And our guest is the director of the UNESCO City of Literature, Melbourne, David Ryding. Welcome, David.
Thanks.
I should say it's a UNESCO City of Literature. 'Cause there is more than one, isn't
one
there?
of 28, but the only one that possibly has a podcast talking about Terry Pratchett.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are you going to put that in your literature? We'd be very honoured.
Oh, it's on the webpage now already.
Oh, good Lord. Okay. But welcome. You're not new to Terry Pratchett, of course.
No. I've read them all, I think, up until the last 4, and I was thinking about this morning. This is the first one I paid for. I didn't shoplift the others. All the other ones were lent to me. So it was kind of interesting to remember that. So I read them as they came out, and sort of that sort of fury of excitement, which might sort of cloud my original opinion of them.
Yes. Well, that does seem to be a theme. There were several people on Twitter saying it was their first one that they bought. I think it was the current one that was out when I started reading them, or very nearly.
Yeah.
It was the first one. No, I bought it for the first time, is what I'm trying to say. Very recently.
Oh, yes.
So, yeah.
Now, I feel before we go on too far, David, some of our listeners might not know what a UNESCO City of Literature is. Can you fill us in?
Yes, it's possibly not as exciting as Interesting Times, but we certainly live in them. I'll give it a go. So Melbourne is a UNESCO City of Literature, one of 28 in the world. We were the second in the world. We have been for 11 years. We got it for a whole lot of reasons. One of the main reasons was the percentage of people who read in Melbourne, percentage of independent bookstores, library usage, but it's basically literature informs the life of the city. And what we do with the designation is trying to make sure that there's an equity of opportunity across the city, as well as connect with all our sister cities.
And was the first one Edinburgh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the parent city we call them. We call them Mum.
Oh,
It's very awkward.
Scottish mum.
And we were second by 3 weeks. We beat Iowa City, which we remind them all the time.
I bet you do.
All the time.
It's a complex lineage if it's 3 weeks and you're calling that one mum, but...
No. Edinburgh was 4 years, and
Okay.
Iowa City was 3 weeks after us.
Oh, well, that's fine then.
Yeah. It just got awkward.
Yeah.
Well, it's going to get more awkward because of this book. So.
Yeah, well, we know that the life cycle of cities is very different from the life cycle of human beings.
It's true. They start as a trolley.
Yeah, that's right. A hatch out of a snow globe. That's cool. Well, and Pratchett, of course, used to come to Melbourne all the time for signing tours. Did he ever come here while we were a City of Literature?
I don't believe so. I don't believe he was. I think he'd stopped travel by then. So
Yeah, the peak of that seemed to be around the sort of mid to late 90s.
yeah, because there was a moment when it really blossomed, and I was trying to line that up with this book, because 17 books is impressive, and he's possibly ripping them out a bit by this stage, because there's a moment, I think, when he sort of discovered plot, and it kind of lines up with some of the Guards books and possibly the Guards book before with a gun. I think it's around about this time.
Yeah, Men at Arms is a few before this.
Yeah, when he starts to, it's not just tropes and stereotypes and momentum and funny asides about fantasy books.
Somebody's got something to say.
Yeah.
This one certainly does have plot.
Yes, it does. It has many
does.
things.
Several plots, in fact.
Yeah.
It has many
Various
things
kinds.
that we're going to talk about. And look, perhaps we should just get straight into it. So we'll start, as we traditionally do, with a reading of the blurb. Mighty battles, revolution, death, war, and his sons Terror and Panic and daughter Clancy. The oldest and most inscrutable empire on the Discworld is in turmoil, brought about by the revolutionary treatise What I Did on My Holidays. Workers are uniting with nothing to lose but their water buffaloes. War and Clancy are spreading throughout the ancient cities. and all that stands in the way of terrible doom for everyone is Rincewind the Wizard, who can't even spell the word wizard. Cohen the Barbarian Hero, 5 foot tall in his surgical sandals, who has a lifetime's experience of not dying and a very special butterfly. Now you're saying there are multiple plots. That kind of does identify the main three.
It does really, it
threads
really
of the
has.
plot,
And
doesn't it?
I think we're overstating the butterfly's effect if we're giving it a plot.
Yeah.
It's certainly
Yeah.
there, but it's, yeah.
It's look, I'll come out and say I think it's basically an excuse for the rest of the plot to rely pretty heavily on coincidence.
Yeah.
Yeah, they start with the gods playing like a game,
Yeah.
so like it just
It's definitely a theme for Rincewind's adventures.
Yeah, it's kind of excusing his lack of momentum that everything's being forced on him.
I'm sorry, but it does leave out the most important plot of all, which is the luggage finding a girlfriend.
I have to just quickly, how good is the luggage? I've forgotten about the luggage because it's been possibly 20 years since I've read a Terry Pratchett.
Yeah.
And maybe less. And the luggage is the best character ever.
I was hoping for more luggage throughout. Like
Yeah.
every time luggage showed up, I'm like, good, there's going to be like a big luggage plot. And like
No,
it kind of
no.
was, but just dotted
it just
throughout.
vanishes from the book for most of it.
Yeah, it just does its thing. It's still one of my favourite things, right up there with the librarian, which I just have to give a shout out to.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a scene between the luggage and the librarian in this book, or are they just sort of adjacent but
They're
not?
in the same room, but they don't interact really.
Because I think that would be great.
Yeah.
Side book, luggage and librarian go on a holiday.
That would be amazing. You could pack a lot of books in that luggage.
Yeah, yeah.
Be a travelling library.
Well, arguably, the luggage could have been the main character for the forward momentum and just drop Rincewind.
Sure.
I like him. I'm a big fan, but
I think, look, I want to say this up the start as well. I think this is Rincewind at his Rincewindiest in this book.
Rincewindiest.
Yeah, but I think he just exemplifies the traits that make him who he is in this book. Like he the number of times he gets the drop on someone by running away unexpectedly. I mean, I think probably it gets overused a little bit, but it just feels like his whole shtick is being genre aware. And in this book, he uses it to maximum advantage, more so than any of his others, I felt. I don't know how to I mean, we've talked many times on the podcast about people's varying degrees of love for Rincewind.
yeah, it's surprisingly not loved. I didn't realise. I quite loved him, but I think I ignored the other books. Like the first 2 books are so impactful to me. They're such a ridiculous delight. Like I grew up reading a lot of fantasy and science fiction and read, all the classics, and those 2 books are just crazy. And I think it's almost disrespectful to bring him back after those 2 books. It should have just been in passing every now and again.
Yeah, he does. I mean, he does. They do have a very different feel.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe sorcery for me is where he's at his most Rincewind, but here he's more aware of how Rincewind he is, if that makes sense. So now he's using his Rincewindy.
He's post-Rincewind.
And he's got all his mates back
Yeah.
as well. And that kind of highlights him, having those supporting characters like Cohen and,
Two Flower.
Yeah.
Sort of. He's sort of there.
Sort of.
Yeah.
He's sort of informing the book, isn't he?
Yeah, yeah. Well, look, we're going to get into it. Should we, I mean, I think there's an, I don't want to say there's an elephant in the room, but there kind of is, that we should address, because I had to say the word inscrutable whilst reading the blurb. And I think that's kind of symptomatic of the thing that made us all a bit uncomfortable about this book.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're going to just
I think
say
we
it,
should
the
just
casual
say it.
racism?
Yeah, I think we have to say it.
Yeah, it is. It's really interesting. I was reflecting on it. It's kind of like Bill Bryson's books, his travel books. I don't know if you've read them. All those bearded Englishmen seem the same to me. He did a fantastic book traveling around England, fantastic book traveling around America, and they just got more generalised. And I kind of read this one and went, this is such a generalised look at, kind of mashup of China and Japan.
Yeah. One of the comments we got was that it seemed like Hong Kong with some Japan element in it, which I disagree with. It felt more Pan-Asian than that. It didn't feel like Hong Kong to me. But
that in itself is a fantasy trope, to have the European part of the map is all different nations with different subtleties and different, but then as soon as you go anywhere else, like to the equivalent of the Middle East or to the equivalent of Africa or the equivalent of Asia, it's just one homogenous mass where everything interesting from that region is just thrown in together. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a question that's possibly putting a lot of depth into the book, which isn't there but it just popped into my head. Is he satirising that area, or is he trying to satire our view of that area? That, you know, in some of these sort of fantasy books, that's the sort of representation we get. I don't believe he's doing the latter, but I just wanted to give him dignity that it wasn't quite as racist as it was.
Because I was thinking about that as well, because the white savior trope is big in fantasy as well, and that is a big part of this book. And because the Discworld series did start off, or still is, a satire of that area, it could be leaning into that a little bit.
I feel like you see little glimmers of where that might be the case, but then, you know, you get a scene with like sumo wrestlers depicted as big, like dumb animals, and
the language thing, thing, but also the fact that that Ankh-Morpork is seen as the better place, which is so obviously not.
Yeah, even by the main villain.
Yeah,
that was quite disturbing.
But is that because it's seen through Two Flower's lens? Like, because all they've seen of it really is the book, and Two Flower just loved the heck out of it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know. Like, I reckon he wrote some brilliant satire, and I think the Guards books is really clever and quite, at times, quite, what's the word I'm looking for? Moving. Moving's not the word. But I don't think this is it.
Affecting. They're affecting.
Affecting, that's the word. I knew it was that. I was going to say adjusting, but that sounds like I was changing my pants. I don't think this is satire. I kind of reckon this is lazy, and he had his 17th book and he went back to these characters and chucked them in a situation. It's got some really nice bits, and it's got a kind of interesting plot, and you could say it shows the difference between Western and Eastern civilization and things like that. Or you can say he was just generalising it. And there's a few, you know, the other uncomfortable thing is the Horde, and there's possibly too many rape jokes.
Yeah,
and comedy doesn't age, which brought a question to me of, is there going to be a new generation discovering Terry Pratchett, or are we the generation who are going to reread it and adore it, but it's going to just pass through in time?
Yeah. Well, look, we should get into the plot. We've alluded to the fact that it does start, as many Rincewind books do, with the gods playing games.
And the lady who will not be named.
Yeah.
Voldemort.
Oh, God, no, that's not her name. But I do love that they play with other kinds of board games because, you know, I'm a board game nerd, so I was into it. And I wonder if he's written it today, where there'd be a Settlers of Catan reference in there.
Castles of Mad King Ludwig.
Oh, that'd be a great one.
Yeah.
Listeners, if you've got great ideas for what board games you think the gods of the Discworld should play, I would like to hear them. The hashtag is Pratchat21 for this episode, so please, you know, chime in if you've got any ideas.
And it's his 21st book, isn't it, as well?
17th.
Damn it. There's another one where like we did the... All right, everything's ruined.
Yeah, we need a name for that. It's like a like a, you know, when you get a Google whack, like when you do a search on Google and you get exactly one result for your search term.
That has never happened to me.
It's called a Google whack.
Did the comedy show about it?
Yeah. There are rules about it. Like, it has to be two. You can only use 2 words. Like, you can't use like a 30-word sentence with, you know, inverted commas around it. And these days, it's very difficult to get one. But we need a term for that when we accidentally manage to do a Discworld book
at the same,
and it's in the sequence. It's the same number as the episode. It's not going to happen very often because we're trying to spread them out a bit. Yeah, because we want to pepper the non-Discworld ones in between the Discworld ones every now and then.
Like luggage through a Rincewind book.
Yeah.
Luggage. How good is the luggage?
Yeah.
Did everyone who read it want to have the luggage?
Yeah, absolutely.
I
still
great? Do. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten the luggage. It was such a delight to read the luggage again.
How great with it, but you just carry your stuff around with you. You don't
it eats sharks?
It eats sharks. I when I was reading that bit and went, I have no idea what that is. I went, it's the luggage. How did I forget the luggage?
Yeah.
But it was an interesting arc for luggage, going from like apex predator to being like just a normal luggage amongst its kind.
Yeah, really weird. And that's an evolution in the fiction too, because originally Two Flower says, and I think in The Light Fantastic, that he, or possibly even in The Colour of Magic, that he bought it in one of those mysterious magic shops.
There was only one.
Weird artifact. And now it's like, but we've got all these like sapient pearwood groves, so we just make them here. Although they do have a comment towards the end when, you know, it turns up with another luggage and some little luggages that he's like, I didn't know they could do that. I thought it involved carpenters making new ones. And I'm like, okay, well, this luggage is still special.
He's still special. That's good to know. I can see it's the sort of thing that would upset a lot of people, that there was multiple luggages after there was only promised one. I can see in the day and age of sort of message boards that being filled with anger, sort of thing that people got upset with.
Yeah. I'm sure old fan Pratchett had things to say.
Yeah.
But it gives like It gives it an extra dimension because you're used to the luggage being the most dangerous thing in the room, and then suddenly just a normal guy.
He didn't have enough story.
No,
He had it's a story, and it's there, but it's a bit butterfly-like compared to the rest of the stuff. And I know having something that doesn't really do dialogue, but I would have quite happily had luggage lead the book. Just talking about the cosmic start, I have this thing that whenever he goes to the cosmic starts or talks about the turtle or things like that, my eyes glaze over and I go, ugh. I'm so much more interested in the mundane, the asides, and I just kind of feel like he's always making a big statement with those.
No, I always have the same thing. As soon as he's like, great at you and turned, and I was like, I like you, but yeah. So it's just like, just skim it faster.
I don't want to deal with, yeah. So if you're the opposite side, aren't you on the turtle shell?
Yeah, I look, I get it, but I also, it's that kind of Marvel Comics idea that any of these books could be somebody's first one, and we want you to know where it's happening.
It'd be hard if it was your first one because there's so many callbacks. This is kind of like the victory lap for Rincewind. Let's bring back all his friends. Let's put them all together. Let's be Rincewind and let's hit everything.
Yeah.
But speaking of Rincewind, he's on a desert island.
Yeah.
Trapped, and we don't find it out at the time, but he's sadly made himself a new wizard hat that says wizard in shells, which I found extremely charming and upsetting.
Yeah.
Because he's been through a lot, because he has his adventures in the first two books, and then he ends up back at the university, and then sometime later, and it's never entirely clear how much time has passed, but it's intimated that it's quite a bit. Then the events of sorcery happen and he ends up in the dungeon dimensions. Then he gets summoned by Eric and goes on a trip through hell and a bunch of places. And when he leaves hell, apparently he ends up on a desert island. And this is where we find him.
Things are looking up. Things are looking up at the end of that, just before he's no longer there.
He's about to get a whole bunch of potatoes.
Lots of potatoes.
So many potatoes.
Yeah, in so many ways of potatoes.
It's so...
Mashed even.
So weird. Why?
But then the potato joke keeps going through the whole book, which I love.
Yeah.
Really strung that out. I mean, look, I think the weird thing is that I remembered this joke, and I remembered that it was food related, and I was pretty sure it was potatoes when I was first reading it, and then it was. I was like, oh yeah, well look, I like potatoes too. But I'm like, Rincewind's that weird character who is presented as very non-sexual, like in that he's a wizard, so he's not supposed to be, but also he's Rincewind, so he's not inclined to be, or at least he's not good at it. And so, there's this weird... I thought there was just a weird choice to do it with him because I'm like, well...
It's funny because it's him.
I guess it is funny because
it's funny because it's root vegetables.
Yeah.
And if you were choosing one vegetable, you'd choose potato.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would, yeah.
There's only ways,
I would.
Yeah. If there's only one vegetable you could have the rest of your life, potato.
Oh, that's a big question. Now I'm thinking about it.
Well, the joke wouldn't work with broccoli, would it?
No.
No.
One
There's not.
You can't really mash broccoli.
And in Discworld, how many green vegetables are there? Possibly not many.
No.
Possibly potatoes is...
We know they have cabbages. They have a
lot of cabbages.
Yeah. You wouldn't be exactly craving cabbages, I don't think.
No.
You'd just rather have coconut surprise.
Meanwhile, back in Ankh-Morpork, while that's going on, there's an albatross
which has not shown up.
Well, it has not shown up. That was. I mean, look, I do enjoy that as a gag. I think Terry Pratchett watch Get Smart because the number of times he reminds me of it when we're doing these podcasts is a lot. But yeah, that was great, and particularly because it was Red Cully who's refusing to understand it's not the thing that's happening. Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah, veterinary Red Cully meet up to discuss the non-albatross that hasn't come from the Agatean Empire.
Yes,
which I just realised sounds like Asian. Okay. All right,
well,
cool.
I was always... Well, I guess because it's not... Because it's spelled with an E and an A rather than an I and an A. I always pronounced it Agatean.
Me too.
And I don't know what the derivation of that is.
Because I got Agetian. I've always said it like Agetian.
Yeah, I think you're right as well.
And
it sounds like Asian because then you later have the Oriental.
Yeah.
With AU for gold.
That's a pun.
Nicely science. But.
Yeah, it's a good pun, but it's not necessarily a great...
No, it's not wonderful, but it's wonderful as wordplay.
It is wonderful wordplay. I agree. I said wordplay, and I meant wordplay, but it's also wonderful wordplay, I guess, in a way.
But they want the Great Wizzard to be sent, and they're trying to figure out who that is.
Yeah.
And so Red Cully goes back to the university, and to his credit, he tries to do the same covert language to the other wizards.
The faculty of wizards.
He summons them all out of classroom 3B,
where
they've definitely been, and tries to find the Great Wizard.
Yeah.
It's a magnificent start. That scene in university is full of energy. The whole albatross sort of Monty Python, I'm not here type thing is brilliant.
Yeah.
And librarian, Ook, So many good things happening there.
Since I don't think I've mentioned this on the podcast, but somebody I saw on, I think it was maybe on one of the Terry Pratchett Reddits, had written that they had just realised that Ook is book with one letter missing. It was like, it never occurred to me.
Yeah.
But I thought it was great.
They made that really good joke about Rincewind being apes number 2 and then repeat it in case you didn't get it. And I was like, why is that repeated? Then I was like, oh, ape shit. Right. Okay. So yeah, it took me a while.
It was harsh. But yeah, they eventually figure out who it is because of the spelling used for Great Wizzard. And they're like, well, where is he? We don't know where he is. And Ridcully's never met him, so they have to like explain to him who he is. And they're all a bit freaked out because they know, no, death follows him, like trouble. And they're talking about the luggage, which I thought was cute. And then they do find him. And this is, Hex previously appeared in one of the first time in Soul Music. And now actually gets a bit more of a role where it does things.
Is this the first time named as Hex?
No, it's originally called Hex, but is hardly in Soul Music. Like they sort of just mention it in passing. But in this book, Hex is, starting to become alive. And this is, an outlet on the Discworld for Terry's fascination with technology and computers. And it just all the little descriptions of, getting more. I don't think they say it in this book. But they talk about how, there's all the little tubes with ants in them. And they say, we're pretty sure we can get it to do this if we can just get some more bugs into the system. Like just those sort of jokes. I love them all. They're so good.
When was this published? But just lining up with the life of the internet, it's interesting thinking about the clacks and that and where it was because...
It's 1994.
Yeah.
So we're talking still the middle of where we're starting to see a transition from, your news groups where Terry was quite active on Old Fan Pratchett through to mailing lists, and then then we'll start to see more internet stuff happening.
Yep, people were still using Amigas and things like that, and the world was still unloading onto personal computers being affordable.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Hex does some excellent work. Thanks
Excellent
to Ponder,
work.
though. Excellent work, yes.
Yeah.
And calculates or finds Rincewind. Basically, I love the way they explain it. A search spell is very simple, but we've got to do a lot of them. So we just ask Hex to do them, and it just does them over and over again. And that, which is, computer programming 101. You learn how to do search algorithms and sorting algorithms. It was cool. I liked that.
What about Ephebian algorithms?
It was very good, but no. And he gets summoned. He gets summoned back to the university. There's some brief business. There's a great sequence where Rincewind can't believe he's back at home, and he just goes and does all the horrible things that
all the things he's
does
missed.
to you.
Yeah.
He gets himself mugged. He eats like some terrible food. He haggles with somebody in the street.
Can we talk about the getting mugged though? Because that was a delight. Because it was like he doesn't just get mugged; he gets mugged by like a teaching group from the Thieves Guild.
That was so good. And look, there was just it was great. And I like that sort of foreshadowed teach as well. It's like, people who teach other people are going to be a theme in this book.
Who possibly the best character in the book.
He steals the show.
Yeah.
Justice for Teach.
Yeah.
It's just kind of Rincewind. He doesn't like the unknown. Regardless of the fact that no one's going to shut his digestion down and beat him up, he's still much happier with that than...
He wants a boring, normal...
Yeah, he doesn't want to leave his room ever again. I think that's actually a line.
He doesn't want interesting times.
There we go.
Yeah. And then Ridcully's so mean to him.
Yep.
But that's what he wants.
You can't be a wizard anymore unless you do this horrible thing that I want to make you do. And he's like, no, I don't want to do and so, they send him off to the Agatean Empire. But it's just the sort of way he resigns himself to it. And he's like, I guess I got to do it.
It was preemptive karma. There was a whole thing about that. Like he sort of,
But it just seemed like to be quite a vicious streak in Ridcully that you don't often see. I thought it was quite mean. But at least he does follow through on bringing him back home. Like he does say, we'll bring you back after a while. And he follows through on that. So I thought, well, that's all right. That's okay. And so he goes, he ends up there, exchange. And there's that nice, we haven't seen this for a while. Like Terry Pratchett is very inconsistent about how he likes to talk about magic working on the Discworld. But by about this time in the books, he's really sort of established that they have to follow some kind of rules of physics in inverted commas. And so there's like a transposition of matter. They send him all the way over there. Then they bring back a barking dog, which is like, a cannon in the shape of a dog. And they don't have cannons in Ankh-Morpork, apparently. No. They've got all kinds of complicated clockwork, but they haven't figured out how to make a big iron barrel with gunpowder at the end of it, which I guess is kind of makes sense maybe, I don't know.
I guess it might be tying into the whole like Asian gunpowder thing, like to the whole theme of like this is what that culture is like and that's what this culture is like, because they have gunpowder and fireworks used for ancestor worship and warfare there. So he might have been trying to make that divide.
Yeah.
Again, or maybe that's reading too much into it, and that's possibly because I just went to an exhibition about gunpowder. So
which we'll talk about more, I think, because of what else was at that exhibition when we get towards the end of the book. But I thought I thought it was quite weird because reading that, it kind of made me feel like, okay, so on this world, there's been no contact with the equivalent of China. So nobody's brought gunpowder back to, the equivalent of Europe, so they don't have it. But then there's a consistent theme in the Agatean Empire where, the locals are like, oh, we've got these things called clocks. And like, yeah, we got clocks. And they go, oh, we got these little things like we make photos. And they go, yeah, we got those, which were all presented as marvels. It's almost like he's totally undoing the idea of what Two Flowers Society was like, presented in The Colour of Magic, where because he was there and he had all this sort of advanced technology and stuff, it felt like his culture had something over the locals, which is now totally like kind of discarded when we actually go to visit them.
But isn't it because there's been smuggling possibly since then? Like since Two Flower, perhaps he introduced the concept of some of these things, and then there's been like a bit of a black market since then, because they do talk about smuggling of like silks and things. So I thought that could be an interim.
And they talk about people settling and opening.
Refugees.
Yeah. Maybe it's highlighting the fact they just don't listen.
Yeah. And actually, that's something to think about too, is that, there's been I saw some interesting news reports around, post the death of Bob Hawke, where people talking about his decision to accept a whole lot of refugees from China during the, Tiananmen Square protests.
Which I did not know, actually.
Yeah, I didn't know about that because I was way too young to be, being informed about that at the time.
And I was being born, like, pretty much at that time.
Yeah, so. And I thought, is that where Terry's formed his opinion of what it's like in China? Like, does he really remember that era, and that's what it's all about for him, and that's what he's trying to really talk about?
This is what, 3 years after?
4 to 5.
Yeah,
like
so
he would have
it's
been
not that
writing it
long.
about 3 years.
It's certainly huge, and certainly the awareness of China not being a good place might have jumped a lot around that time, obviously. Yeah, interesting.
And there is the Imperial Square is a big part of the plot as well.
That's
and
true.
he even has that line where Rincewind is told, "Don't be in the Imperial Square," and he's like, "Is that square with a capital S? Because I can hear that." Like,
yeah, yeah, and all the revolutionaries are very young. They're all student age or younger. So, yeah, I think that would have to have been a huge influence.
it did feel more like China than Hong Kong to me. Like, there are other like Pan-Asian elements, but like the grounding of it felt like China.
Primarily to me felt like a very sort of old-fashioned view of China, but then with way too many Japanese things thrown in there that didn't make any sense for them to be there.
No.
Like it was just, no, those are two different cultures. They would not like them, who would also not like being mashed together, I feel.
No.
In general. So, yes. But he arrives there in a snowdrift, smashing into a bunch of people, breaking up, smashing into some guards who are like escorting some prisoners.
And they're bailing because they're experimenting with the barking dog, like because it's on fire when it gets sent.
Oh, that's right, because that's why it's set up. They're going to use it to blow up some peasants.
And there's that magnificent unseen university scene as they're trying to work out the barking dog, which is just like a flagpole scene for how stupid they all are. The smartest men. Just their dealing with it is, magnificent.
Who solves it in the end? Like, is it Ponder?
Ponder's looking at it going, I think it might be dangerous.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm just going to put this out.
Shall I pinch this out? Oh, why not? It's just like, it's just...
But then even he at the end is like, I do hope I haven't broken anything.
Yeah.
And you're like, Ponder, what are you doing?
Just like just a big room of Oxford University academics out of touch with the world is the way I see them. You can just... That absolute stereotype you get across culture and media.
Yeah, totally. But this begins Rincewind's reputation in the place, because he seemed to have done a mighty magic. Like he's appeared out of nowhere on a, they describe it as like an invisible dragon, which that seems like a fair way to represent it. But then he also magically transforms an old man into a warrior, because who happens to be there? It's Cohen the Barbarian, who's let himself be captured or has been captured. I can't remember. What was his excuse for that happening? Was he just doing it to find out what they were up to?
Because he's left his hoard elsewhere.
Yeah,
his silver
by
horse.
Yeah, I haven't met the Horde yet.
But yeah, so is he undercover or has he been legitimately captured and was just about to free
I don't
himself?
think he tells us the truth from memory.
He's in disguise, or he claims he's in disguise.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I think he's let himself be captured.
Yeah.
Because he does beat up the guards very easily once he's able to.
Yeah. And he sort of reveals that he's there, because the barbarianing, all the joy's gone out of barbarianing back where he's from.
As it does.
There's no mythical creatures to kill anymore.
Yep.
Nobody really cares if you do it.
And he also has that line about hating political correctness. He's like, because he's got all the troll teeth. He's like, someone will tell you it's offensive to trolls to have a mouthful of troll teeth now. It's like, there's also that.
Yeah. Oh, he's an old man.
No.
This is what we think of
What
as
is he,
an old man
100
now.
and something? Yeah.
105, I think they say at the end.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and he's thinking about retiring. Good run.
Maybe.
Yeah.
And we discover that he's now got a gang.
Yeah.
Formidable gang.
Yeah, they're amazing.
The Horde.
The Silver Horde.
The Silver Horde. Yeah.
Pun on the other Genghis's Golden Horde.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, I find most of them interchangeable, which I think is why Teach is probably our favourite.
Yeah.
He's the only one he really stands out. I
Like
mean,
the swearing one.
yeah, but you can't
remember
really
the name.
You can't remember the names, can you? 'Cause
Yeah,
they're-
they do sort of go in together, stereotypes of different points of aging.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you could have sort them in your head into the one who's
Can't
in a
hear.
wheelchair and can't hear anybody, who's basically Wendell Poons as a barbarian.
Yep.
And then you've got the one who likes to swear and the one who makes the really inappropriate jokes
Yep.
or
All the
references
time.
all the time.
Yep.
And then the other ones.
Yeah.
Are there other ones?
Yeah, there's like 6 of them, but there's like 2 of them who I don't think have any particularly defining characteristics. So it's I found that very interesting. And then, but I think the reason there's 6 of them is that particularly towards the end, they have that big discussion about all the barbarians who are dead now. And you're left thinking, oh, this is really all there is.
Yeah.
Like this is it. Like there's no more.
It's like a reunion,
Yeah.
like a last hurrah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they never talk about Nigel, but I think Nigel's like that throwback to like trying to recapture something that did exist, and he's like the one young fan of the old thing,
Yeah, yeah.
So he's like a new thing.
Yeah. He's like I was going to say he's like a neo-Nazi, but he's not like that at all. But he is. He's
Neo-barbarian.
He's a neo-barbarian. Yeah, he's much nicer than that. He doesn't believe in something awful because he's sort of taken on the heroic aspects of it and doesn't want the rest of it, and that's quite difficult for him.
Just like a second wave barbarian.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah. Now we've got this old guard who are all that's left of that tradition, and they've decided there's no future in it at home, so we've come to do a big theft here in the Agatean Empire.
Which is meant to be a long, 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 long way away. So it took them a long time to get there.
Do they come together or do they like meet up along the way? Like I would read the book of them all on a boat, trying to just like 3 months on a boat,
Yeah,
Yeah.
sharing out duties.
slow boat to the Agatean Empire.
Yeah.
Is that how it works? I don't know.
Was it 3 men in a boat, but 6?
6 men in 6 men in a boat. 6 men in a wheelchair in a boat.
Yeah.
That's a big boat.
All played by the Pythons.
Yeah, yeah, that'd work.
Yeah.
It's interesting that they all want to work together too, because you get the impression they have a mutual respect, but that maybe they probably didn't originally like each other and would fight with each other.
It's the last choice.
Yeah.
So maybe they did come separately and met. Maybe we're thinking too much into their backstory when they don't have that much front story.
Well, I think they have come together. I think it's pretty clear they've planned this together, and a lot of the planning has been Teachers doing.
Yeah.
And I like that they really leave pretty vague the story of how they met Teach. Like you get a little bit of detail where it's like, oh, and then he met him, and then it was like they give a few kind of very vague details about it, and then that's it. We don't hear the full story of that, and I'm quite happy for that to be a mystery. I just love it.
But you're happy for it to be a mystery, but in my version, Teach puts a notice in the newspaper saying, I'm writing a book about barbarians and I'd like to meet some of you and hear your stories. They all meet in a tavern and they decide to go on an adventure and they leave that night. So that's my version.
Could have actually been Teacher's book.
Yeah.
You know, Teacher's such an interesting character, and they're the main driving point in many ways. And if you think that Pratchett's trying to talk about revolutions and different ways of doing things, because obviously he's saying barbarians are just going to storm the city, and there's a lot of political intrigue, and that's generated for the man. Rincewind's just a plot device, and a pretty blunt plot device, and kind of a familiarity for us. Teach could have been the character, and I wonder if this book was written later, he would have been the character, because there was a sort of braveness of bringing in new lead characters, but this is back in the older age, sort of, you need the Sam Vines, you need the witches, you need the Rincewind, you need the deaf, you need the characters to get you to go back into it.
No, I think that could work really well, and then Rincewind would be peppered through it like the luggage is.
Yeah, or the luggage. No Rincewind. I like Rincewind, but I'm just saying, I just think the Teacher's such a... Really, there's a lot of really... Possibly has the best jokes, the best mental images, and the best discussion on if there is a satire in here. And again, not sure. It's being driven from him and him trying to civilise the Horde, the Silver Horde.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that does have my favourite section of the book is them going through the markets. But we'll get to that. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think we're nearly there. I think, because Rincewind decides he doesn't want to hang around with barbarian invaders.
As you do.
Yeah.
I made that decision Thursday. Yeah.
And so he gets on a horse and rides off. But he's already noticed that there's something about the people here that they are very eager to obey and to show great...
Yeah.
I mean, not beyond showing respect to people, they're just completely subjugated in a way that he can't quite put his hands on. And Cohen says to him, they got something. He's like, what do they whip them? And Cohen's like, no, they got something much worse than whips here, which I don't know that Terry actually names at any point later in the book.
And that's such a low sequence when he's learning the language and talking to characters and things. That's when it kind of goes, what are you doing here? Are you generalising? Are you stereotyping? Is it really racist? It's real. I find it's interesting reviewing that early bit with a cannon and arriving. There's so much energy early in the book, and it gets to this bit, and it's like, ooh, okay, awkward.
Yeah, not sure how I feel about it. Yeah, I had the same experience. Also, I was the nerdy part of me was going, he doesn't speak their language. No. He and Two Flowers spoke a different language that they had in common. But then I'm like, but maybe he did speak it and he just never thought to ask it, or maybe Two Flower taught him while they were spending months and months having adventures together. So who knows? But I think it's not a big problem, but it did make me think, But there's so many things that he's changed his mind about since those first books.
Yeah.
And it's not a big problem.
And it is interesting, the ties to history as well. You have Lord... Okay, so I thought it was Lord Hong, but this is the thing I thought about earlier. It might be Lord Hung, which... Hung means red in both Cantonese and Mandarin. So that would make sense to me because of the Red Army's ties to him and also just the mentions of red throughout. So I think maybe...
Yeah, let's go that one. Makes it seem much more clever.
Yeah, so...
Let's hope that was intentional.
Yeah, we wouldn't never be able to ask him.
I think there are little language things in there as well because I'm not sure if this is common knowledge and I'm just repeating things that are already known, but the idea of everyone outside the wall being ghosts, that's... if you're, I don't know if this is a Hong Kong thing or if it's a Chinese-wide thing, foreigners or white foreigners specifically are called guailao, which literally translated means ghost person.
Yeah.
And so that seemed to be that for me.
Yeah, it did hint at being a lot cleverer than it seemed.
Yeah, there are
the ghost thing I thought there was something, just kind of curious about, it's translated in so many languages, how that's going to come across when it's done in Swedish.
Look, the translation of puns and all those sort of references is... you do a whole podcast about that. That would be incredible.
The title of importance of being earnest in other language. It's just...
Yeah.
But I originally thought it was a joke on Hong Kong because General Hong. But I think it actually might be a joke on red because that would make more sense.
So... suggesting it's a joke on Hong Kong wanting to leave China.
Possibly
the fact that Hong wants to get rid of the emperor and...
I didn't think into it as deeply as that. I thought it might be just this is an Asian-ish word, but that would be an interesting interpretation too.
I wonder if sometimes he gets a starting point and writes himself into a different position, because that's an obvious starting point if you're pitching the plot to your publisher. Well, also you're saying, I'm Terry Pratchett, I've written 16, I'm doing number 17, make money off me. But you're going, this is it's the counterweight continent, this is Hong Kong living with China, there'll be a bit of Japan in so the Chinese don't get upset with me just in case I overpublish there. That's interesting.
Yeah, And there is also another point I wanted to bring up about it being the counterweight continent, because there's that comment early on in the book about Rincewind talking about one day possibly he'll meet the other Rincewinds that has a much better time, and he hopefully will meet him with a weapon who's on the other side of the seesaw. And then he goes to the counterweight continent. So that's...
Which is the other end of the seesaw.
Yeah, so like, is he becoming is the image of the Great Wizzard the other... Rincewind. So I was wondering if that was also...
This book's getting a lot deeper than it was when I read it.
And look, by the end of the book, he's being offered the role as like the head wizard of the local university, and he doesn't want to take it because he's like, that'll never work out. But
it's because he contains multitudes, and it's kind of like, that's another thing I thought was interesting, and I think that's very deliberate as well.
And then, of course, when we come back in The Last Continent, we'll see a very literal kind of version of that quest. But let's not get ahead of ourselves there.
But yeah, so the language stuff was interesting, and I think the ties to history is interesting because Lord Hong actually does at one point talk about how much he hates the complexity of language, which is, of course, something that Chairman Mao did, was simplify down the traditional form.
Right.
So there is that connection as well. Not that he's literally that character. Like, he's not an analog for him. There's just like cherry-picked elements from history.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Well, I mean, it's very leaning heavily on that sort of isolationist period that both Japan and China went through, where it's like, we don't want to have anything to do with the outside world. We don't want outsiders here. We don't want to trade with anyone. And, it's a famous part of, particularly of Japanese history. So that's it reminded me a lot of that. But then also, one of the things that really struck me, though, when I was getting towards the end of the book, is how few local characters really have any impact on the plot. Like, really, the main one is the villain. Like, Hong is the main one. And he wants to be a Westerner. So you're like, I mean, that's not what's driving him, ruining everything. And he's not even really the problem. Like, the problem is presented more as the way the society is functioned.
Yeah.
And that's, it's just,
and the ultimate solution is to bring in white barbarians to fix it. Barbarians who've been sort of coached into being slightly more civilized.
Yeah.
It's like a weird
Or a completely random element of a wizard who's not a wizard.
Yeah.
So it's how does change happen? Does it happen slowly through institution or through chaos?
Yeah. And it certainly doesn't seem to happen through revolution, because it's around this time that we first meet, our first revolutionary. We don't know who she is at the time.
Yep.
Who helps Rincewind escape from being captured after he gets off his horse, because he finds that nobody questions him when he's riding around on a horse. But then when he sits down, gets off a horse, and he reads the pamphlet that Cohen gave him. He's given him a copy of What I Did on My Holidays, which I do love as a joke, that is the revolutionary pamphlet.
It's a nice callback, and I think if you've read the previous ones, there's a payoff there.
Yeah.
And that's when he orders the food, isn't it? And the food's not like it is at home.
Well, he gets captured,
which
he
is
escapes.
That classic, what, you don't have chow mein here? What's wrong with you? Type situation of the European traveller.
Yeah. He's like, I love Chinese food, but this is not what I'm used to.
It's not authentic.
Yeah.
It's not authentic.
Every country in the world, your pizza, you don't have pineapple on it? What's wrong with you?
Yeah. What do you mean you don't make chicken parmigiana in Italy?
And you've got a place called Parma. Yeah. Surely that's where Parmigiana's from.
Yeah. No.
Oh, bless travelling.
And it's interesting that, when you have travelling in the witches' books, like when they, in Witches Abroad, where they go to Genoa and they go through like this whole series of travelling adventures, but they hit all these different little European cultures. Again, here the contrast is we're going to the one place that's the equivalent of all of Asia on the Discworld. And you're like, oh, really? Yeah. But yeah, he escapes from the guards. He goes into the inn. He orders some food. He gets...
told we don't serve rebels here, and like with a bit of a wink and a nudge and a looking at his notepad
and a fortune cookie.
Good scene.
That is a good scene.
It's such an antidote to the first scene of foreignness and generalisation. That one is really nicely written, and also the introduction of the revolutionaries. There's some tension in it, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and then he runs away from them as well.
Yeah.
which I really like.
It's unusual. He hasn't done that much.
But he does it again. I love that how many times he does this in this book.
Yep.
He's just like relentlessly, no, I don't want to be part of your adventures. I'm out of here. That's his defining characteristic, and he's really embracing it.
Yep.
And he's just like, I'm gone, I'm out. And he does it so many times. And I like it that when you think he's safe, he's still like, nope, don't want to be part of your revolution. I'm out of here.
Yep. Don't know where I'm going, but I'm going to run.
And then, he gets recaptured by them after getting into a bunch of trouble. and running into a bunch of stereotypes, I suppose, again. Although mostly he runs into the local version of Cut Me Own Throat Dibbler.
Yeah.
Disembowel myself honourably. Yeah.
And he's in the square, just like the real one.
Another character forgotten about was Dibbler, so it was good to remember those sausages.
Yes.
And the Bunnings sausage of Discworld.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not the Bunnings sausage of Discworld. Bunnings sausages are good.
No,
they're cheap,
not.
but
they're
not. There's no meat in those sausages.
The thing about Dibbler, and this I find him fascinating, is that he still works because of the different con man kind of sneaky and he's not really a con man. He's more sort of just that dodgy businessman. He's Arthur Daly, basically. And everyone can recognize that because of the different things that he does. Like if he ever wrote a book about the internet coming to the Discworld, which he kind of does with the Clacks, Dibbler would be the one who might figure out how spam would work. But he'd be selling something legit, or something at least that you could actually buy.
And Dibbler gets a bigger and bigger role, doesn't he? Because there's those characters that come back again and again, and you love. Like I don't think there's ever a Guild of Thieves book. I might be wrong.
Well, Pyramids is kind of the closest you
get.
Oh no, that's
Assassins.
Assassin's Guild. So there's not really a Thieves Guild book.
And Dibbler and the Librarian and all the other unseen. There's ones that just kind of rotate through, and you see. Yeah. I completely forgot about Dibbler.
He has those books where there's a niche for him, like moving pictures where he becomes the movie producer.
Yeah.
The soul music where he becomes the music promoter, and those things where he pops up and like there's a niche for me to fill. And then in the other books, he's sort of just hanging around,
just coming
selling
around,
dodgy sausages.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Like now, we don't have that kind of dodgy sausage in a bun kind of business. Bunnings. I mean, Bunnings, sure, but that's like just sausages you buy from the supermarket. There's nothing sus about that.
It depends on who's doing the sausages.
You lost me at sausages you buy at the supermarket. Nothing sus in them. There's just no sausage in them.
No, look,
they're cardboard.
I think now, though, now we in an age of food trucks, like when there's a group of people and they need to eat, that's what's going to show up, like the taco truck or Beatbox Burger is going to be there.
I'd love to see the sausage in the bun food truck. Just someone go completely retro. When you see the Portuguese chicken truck and your taco and the hamburger one that's franchised everywhere. And we're just sausages and tip-top bread. I don't even know if we get tip-top bread anymore.
They could find a way to make it look like it.
Just
bunting.
Yeah. I mean, people would expect it to
Poster of Lisa McCune.
You know what you do, though, is you get sponsored by Bunnings.
Yeah. The MasterChef Challenge, sausage in a bun. You've just got...
I don't want that to happen.
And it can't be too fancy, you lose points.
MasterChef's, and the Australian version, as everyone knows, has been sold around the world. And I was watching it in Italy last week in Italian, and they were doing a team challenge. It's the same show. You don't need to see the dialogue. The same things are happening.
Yeah.
Except they were cooking pasta, which I thought was a bit obvious.
Yeah.
Oh, well, never mind. But look, after meeting Dibbler, he gets recaptured by the rebels, and they force him, basically, to use his Great Wizzard powers, inverted commas, because, and interestingly, Butterfly, is it Pretty Butterfly? That's her name, isn't it?
It's something like that.
But I quite like, no, it is, because I abbreviate it to PB, which I'm always like, it's peanut butter, but also it's Princess Bubblegum from Adventure Time.
And Peppermint Butler.
It's just so many characters have those initials. It's great. But she sees through him immediately, which I kind of loved. She's like, you are the person, but also you are not the person. Like you're the correct human being, but you do not, like, you're clearly a fraud. But she's very harsh in that she's like, she starts off, she never, I think, gives him a break and says, like, you didn't ask for this, because that's the position that he's in. Yes, as he's reminded when he goes through the book, he said a lot of boasty things to impress Two Flowers so that he could keep getting gold Rhino off him. But also, he was clearly not capable of those things.
But and this is, I guess we're jumping a bit ahead, because when it is revealed that she is Two Flowers' daughter, maybe that's some of her resentment is coming from that, because she's read the thing and she's sort of seen what Rincewind was like in a way that the other people haven't. So she's like, oh, you were kind of like tricking my dad, so I don't like you for that. Yeah.
She's such a good character who's so underdone.
Yeah, she doesn't
There's
really get to do much.
There's kind of a good book in here which has got a whole lot of flobby other stuff. And it's interesting talking about those allusions to Hung and what you were saying, Liz. And there's something, the book's a lot better than it could be, should be.
The foundation is there.
There's something there. There's something, and he's gone, I need to put this bit, I need to put this bit, I need to put this bit, and it's not.
Yeah.
It's almost like possibly badly edited.
Yeah, or it's another round of drafts.
Well, there's that thing with authors when you get so successful that the editor's not listened to anymore.
Who's the one who won't let her work be edited? I can't.
Was it Rowling?
No, it's one of those
she just wrote some really long books.
It's someone like Danielle Steele, but not Danielle Steele, like one of those sort of
someone just
big
refuses.
names.
Yeah, but you get a point of power.
Anne Rice.
Oh, Anne Rice.
Surprising.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it was Anne Rice.
Fair enough.
Yeah. If you don't have a relationship with the editor from the start and they keep going back, I reckon they just proof it and send it back. And I think this one, there's something interesting that someone would challenge. And
I think now they would. I think I don't know that happened with this book. I think the editor was on the same page about being okay with the kind of jokes and stuff that's in here and prioritizing those. Because I think for me, what really puts it off the rails is there's not a consistent and clear idea of what the culture of the Agatean Empire is. Like if it was based on a particular Asian culture or if it was its own separate thing that had a lot of unique points to it, instead of I just want to get as many weird fantasy versions of Asian things in here, which is what it feels like.
Yeah, it's like when you go to an Asian restaurant and you're like, what is this decor and what is this food?
Yeah. It just feels weird because it's like, okay, you're running through paper walls and you're interrupting someone painting on crockery and you are getting nearly squashed by... Yeah, there's all the poetry and you're getting squashed by a sumo or something. It's basically... And it's primarily China and Japan. And if you are at all culturally aware of the difference between those cultures, it's just... glaring all the time.
They're not till you merge. Yeah. I wonder if that's...
And there's no story reference. And look, it is fantasy. And a previous commenter, and I didn't necessarily agree with all of the things that they said, responding to our discussion about the kind of previous version of this, which was the idea of Klatch, and that Klatch is this sort of universal... foreign place, which effectively is all of not just the Middle East, but also all of Africa. But then you also find out that Klatch is a particular country. And I think he sort of revised that later on to go, oh, that's a bit awful. Let's make it a bit more specific. That it is a fantasy and you do have to allow for the fact that, okay, you can invent things. But the problem is that that's not how he deals with the European parts of the Discworld.
Yeah, and if you... get on the idea that satire was coming in more than parody by this stage, and I think if you look at the life of the books, satire certainly comes in a lot more, and this might be the beginning of that. As a satire, you cannot satire to a general opinion, if that makes sense. I think you need to be specific, but I also think a general opinion of those countries is trying to give distance from being political. If it just was China, and at that time, at 4 years after Tiananmen Square, it would have been a political book, and selling a fantasy comedy as a political book doesn't sound like a great marketing idea. I don't know. I don't work in book selling, but it would gain some distance. And it's a really nice thing. So the test where to become, is it?
Oh, yeah, like the sanitation
work, and you have to write a poem and things. I love that. I thought that was brilliant.
And the guy that cheated by like pre-writing a poem about wind on his leg.
Yeah.
That was great. And that kind of stuff, that I feel like we needed more of that, because that was like, oh, here's what the culture of this place is. Here's where it's all gone wrong.
And it's celebrating it as well. It's celebrating the culture, not dismissing the culture. And things like the gentle pokes about, oh, you don't have that food, which is our perception. It's great. But then the language things and, it's when are you laughing with and when you're laughing at, and when you're totally ignorant what you're laughing at is the question there. There's 3 questions.
Yeah. And I feel like if we'd had a clearer idea, because I think what would have solved a lot of the discomfort that the book brings with it now is if we'd had just a really clear idea of the culture of the place that was told through the story rather than a bunch of, weird jokes. Because that also would have helped with the fact that, they make all these references, they got something worse than whips here, but they never really explain how that culture evolved or where it comes from or what it really means. It never goes very deeply into that. And I think that felt to me like a thing that was missing at the heart of the book.
Yeah.
Just vaguely implied mental subjugation for a reason.
Because it had been that way for a long time. But I'm like, but that doesn't tell me anything about the culture. There's plenty of things in our culture that have been that way for a long time. But it's more interesting to look back at why are they there and how did they get there and what harm are they doing to us. Whereas this book doesn't ask at least 2 of those questions.
And you're right. He does put the lens on Europe. and through looking at Ankh-Moor Park and things like that. So it's kind of, it's interesting.
Well, anyway, while he's being forced to do this rescue mission that he will ultimately be successful in due to yet another coincidence, the coincidence is there because the Silver Horde are enacting their plan of sneaking into the place.
God bless them.
And sneaking in through, which I thought it was a sewer system, but it seems that it's more just like an aqueduct kind of system.
They do originally scope it out by like handing over their papers that said, sorry, I'm like a wandering madman, I don't have papers.
Yeah. That was great. That was a nice touch. That was a very funny gag.
Yeah.
And this is where, teachers' influence is coming to the fore because they've been through the marketplace to get to through the square, which is a great sequence where he's teaching the
He's trying to
barbarians.
civilize them. Yep.
It actually weirdly reminded me, I went to Japan for the first time recently and I went to Nara, which is one of the locations of one of the old imperial palaces there. And we were in the big, there's a massive Buddhist temple there. And we were there just hanging around and there were lots of groups of school kids and they were being asked to go up to tourists and talk to them in English. And this felt kind of like that, where like their teachers like going, okay, go and have this interaction, like go and say, because remembering that the barbarians are also learning to speak the language as well as everything else. So they're going to interact with these people and just be nice to them and be friendly. And you're like, I just thought it was really cute that I was remembering something that happened with 8-year-old school kids as what was happening with these 90-year-old barbarians.
Yeah. Give me all your one apple and I will give you a money.
Yeah. So good.
And there's nothing more confronting than going to a market in another country, regardless of be it Asia or Europe, wherever. It's where you're putting all your considerably lack of language skills on display as well as everything.
It is really fun or strange experience as a white appearing Cantonese speaker to go to a Hong Kong market and see the change, the small change when you suddenly start speaking in fluent Cantonese. Yeah, there is a change of tack and it is actually easier to negotiate the price down. But yeah, not that I do tons of haggling. It's just, it's already inflated.
Yeah.
I was in a market in Nanjing a couple of years ago and I saw a group of prawns trying to escape. Totally unrelated. I just wanted to bring it up because there's nothing funnier than watching a line of prawns, or sadder, prawns who got out of their bucket and were running down the street. Little guys just trying to get... They possibly lived. I don't think they did.
Oh, wow.
That sounds like exactly something that would be in this book.
It does.
Well, it's like there's that pile of tortoises and there's one looking sadly at them going, you think you've got a bad day. That was great.
Yeah.
Are you allowed to eat tortoises on the disc?
Well, tortoises maybe, but not turtles.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
And what's the difference?
Turtles, I don't know that this is a scientific difference, but turtles have flippers and tortoises have feet, is my understanding. So turtles are aquatic and tortoises are only semi-aquatic.
I don't know.
Just testing. Seals and sea lions.
Seals and sea lions?
Yeah.
One's a singer.
No.
I thought a sea lion was just a really big kind of seal.
No. One's got ears and one hasn't.
Oh, didn't
There
know
you
that.
go.
There you go.
This is
If we're
really going
listening
off topic.
underwater?
This is on the next one.
No, this is good though. This
Weird
is
World
good
of
trivia.
Animals.
Yeah.
These things stress me that I learn them and I just go, so no. And then they go, what's a terrapin? I'm like, I don't know. It's the one no one likes. I don't care.
Harsh. It's like a freshwater I don't know, actually. I'm gonna. That's going in the show notes. I will explain the difference between a turtle, a tortoise, and a
Seal
terrapin.
and sea lion is the one. Seals don't have ears. Sea lions have visible ears.
Oh, okay.
There we go.
Is it because their
Thanks,
head
people.
is sealed?
Oh, we practiced that one for months. I'm glad we landed it.
Well, no, I always have to come up with a way to remember the thing.
Yeah. I
So
wondered why it
which
was in the
one-
script. It makes sense now.
Yeah.
Great.
That's good. That's good. The sequence of them going through the market is great. And then they get into the palace. There's that weird bit where there's that official who's walking around the sacred, it's like a Zen garden because it's all well raked. Again, a Japanese thing in a largely Chinese sort of place. Weird. But he's listening to them as they walk underground and he can hear the noises, but he can't understand what they're saying because they're speaking their own language. And he's like, are they ghosts? What's happening? And then he bangs his head on something and falls over because he's not looking where he's going. I thought that was quite funny, but also weird that character never comes back. And you're like, that was a strange vignette. And I think there's a lot of little bits in that where he's put something in, and if he'd reused some of those characters and sort of built up the culture through that, it would have been better
It was
than
like
all
the
these
five families thing. I didn't really think there was much point to that. Like, I was like, oh, this is going to be a big thing with the 5 families, like the McSweeneys and I've forgotten all the other ones because I just thought that was funny. But it's not real. They have a few meetings and that's it.
It's so underdone. And why. And
I thought, I kind of remembered that he doesn't really do anything with it, but I thought maybe the McSweeney's thing would be a way to talk about how the empire was unified and what the influences were and how it worked. But really, it's just to repeatedly have the joke of throwing a Celtic name in with a bunch of Chinese sounding names.
Yeah, I thought that was going to be more of a thing. Like maybe there would be like a bit of a backstabbing thing, or one of the families would come around, or like. But yeah, it was kind of just a faint backdrop to show that there's usually struggles when the emperor dies. But I don't think that really paid off, and I was a bit disappointed in that plot-wise.
Yeah, and they very vaguely show how awful the emperor is.
Yeah.
When you meet him, and he's an old, crazy, old, horrible man.
Well, he's Joffrey if he lived for longer.
Yeah, yeah. And we do meet him mainly because Rincewind manages to explode the wall just by being there at the time when the bomb that Teach has planted in the wall goes off and explodes it as a distraction so that all the guards go and check that out and they can get into the throne room. They do get into the throne room in the palace, the Silver Horde. Then the sequence of events is a bit muddied in my mind because it made sense in one way, and then I'm like, no, it can't have happened in that order because Rincewind gets taken before the Emperor, and that has to happen before the Horde go in and find him dead because they think they're going to kill him. But I think they're still sneaking around in their eunuch disguises at that point.
Yep, that's right. Just one of me.
Yeah, and they're so put out when they find out what they've been dressed as. And you're like, you barbarians, why do you care? Like, they have this weird... I like how it muddled their sense of honor is, where they're like, no, we'll stab people ourselves and we don't send other people to do it for us, but we also won't lie and pretend that we're somebody else. And we're like, why not? That's a great tactic. Like, they talk about how their height of deception is that they invite someone round for dinner and wait until they get really drunk and full of bread and then they kill them. And you're like, okay, well, that's a good tactic, I guess. But yeah, so the Emperor, we meet the Emperor, Rincewind meets the Emperor, and the Emperor is clearly the most evil bastard. And then he gets put in the prison along with a bunch of the revolutionaries who have also been captured whilst trying to break in.
But one of them's missing. We haven't really talked about.
Oh, yeah.
Herb,
one fire herb.
Yeah.
And I like how he sort of reuses that idea of, Two Flower, and then Two Flower talks about his boss in The Colour of Magic, whose name is Nine Turning Mirrors.
Yep.
And then there are some names like that, but then he just sort of forgets about it for like a whole bunch of characters in this. And I'm like, but they were cool. Like that gave it a unique identity. A
unique identity?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't a very ballsy decision to just forget about it. But yeah, I really liked those names, and I was sad that there wasn't more of them. Although there's a couple of good jokes that involve them, like the 2 privates who find Rincewind later on in the book. But yeah, they all get put together. And yeah, we have skipped over that because there is some dissent among the ranks in the rebellion.
Because what's happening is the rebellion is being... We know by this point that the rebellion is actually being orchestrated by Lord Hung, who wants to cause a big revolution. But the rebels are a bit too polite. All they want to do is posters that are a bit sort of like, oh, bit of inconvenience for the emperor, please, when he's doing a bad thing. And really what he wants is a big sort of flaming mess.
Yep.
And so they're all kind of being told about the chapters in other towns. But really, are there chapters in other towns, or is it just this small group? And there's... Herb's kind of like the thing that's stoking these fires, and then suddenly he's not there.
And it's a weird kind of mashup because there's a lot of references to revolutionary stuff. Like there's jokes that reference, the Russian Revolution and the French Revolution. Not so much the American sort of War of Independence, but which I would have thought would be in their mix as well.
They don't even have like I think it's mooncakes. Like there was like that's part of the Mid-Autumn Festival. Was like messages were baked into mooncakes, and that's why it's part of the festival.
Oh right.
But I mean, maybe that's just digging too deep.
No,
but also because there isn't actually a rebellion happening.
Yeah.
So
and because it seemed like it's a weird kind of point where it's not the idea that the people who lead these revolutions become corrupted and then screw over everybody. Like it's not about Stalin, but it's more about how somebody can use people's desire to do something good and twist it. And I think again that's where the message of what he's trying to say is not quite clear. It's not a very clear satire, and most of the fire in the message goes to Rincewind telling them that they're idiots for like doing it the way they are, and that they expect someone else to come and solve their problems, which is kind of like him rallying against the trope that he is there to represent in a way. And that all does come to a head in the dungeon where very conveniently the guards are all dead, and again it looks like Rincewind is, well, it's easy to, if you think he's got magic powers, assume that that's something to do with him.
And who's in the next cell?
Oh yeah, this is where we meet Two Flower.
Yeah.
I was really happy to see him, but I also was really disappointed with him in this book because he really feels very little like the character that we know, and he's in it so little.
He's just there to be Butterfly's dad.
Yeah.
Like just to make that connection to legitimize her a bit more.
It is like a greatest hits bringing him back.
I would have, I don't know. I would have liked him to be more proactive part of the plot, mainly because then there would have been more local people involved.
But he's also like, his whole thing is kind of that he's bumbling and optimistic. And so I think I'd have liked to see him more, but I also don't feel that he as a character would have had much to do with the machinations of it all, because he was a bit too innocent. Like that's why they have that comment about his wife must have been like a super intelligent sort of manager of him, because like they have that thing about, we'll send him off to do a task while we go around to do the map thing, which I thought again was a bit underdone, but yeah.
Yeah. And also he was like, what am I trying to say? She's been fridged. You know, he gets violent towards the end of the book. He wants to fight Lord Hong. He wants to do something. He wants to support his daughter's revolution. And it's because his wife has died.
Yeah.
And also there's that thing where he has a conversation with Rincewind, who says, you never mentioned you had a family. And he just sort of shrugs it off. And it's like, well, you never really asked, or whatever he says.
Well, he said it lots of times.
He said it lots of times, but he didn't really answer. But
those language barriers.
But then you're like, why were you on holiday by yourself?
Yeah.
Like, that's a bit of a weird thing to do, to go across the other side of the world by yourself and leave your
kids would have been
wife.
quite small.
Well,
or
not even born.
At that time.
I think they probably weren't even born, because the amount of time that's meant to have passed, it seems like it's at least 20 years, and none of those kids are 20 years old. So it's a long time.
He's an interesting choice to come back, because obviously he has a part to play at the end of sorts, but it's not a part that's irreplaceable.
No.
And though, you know, the daughters didn't have to be daughters. They could have just been characters. And
yeah, so I guess I was really happy to see him, because I love the character a lot, but also I was a bit sad because I was like, well, you're kind of not really here. Yeah. But while that's going on, this is when the Silver Horde get into the Emperor's bedroom, and they're like, yeah, we'll kill him, and he's already dead, because this is all part of Lord Hong's plan for the rebels to break out and for it to appear that they have assassinated the Emperor, which is not how things are supposed to go. It's supposed to be one of the, leaders of the noble families. And this gives him, can we detail what his actual plan is? Because I kind of get it, but it's a bit, for someone who's presented as being so ultra hyper competent, and he is one of those hyper competent villains, particularly at the start of the book. By the end of the book, he's just a rambly mess.
It is a bit confused.
Figure out what he wanted, because I know he wanted Ankh-Morpork somehow, but like,
he
how
wanted
did this
go and invade, didn't he? Didn't he want to go and take?
So he had to be
Ankh-Morpork?
emperor to do that.
Yeah.
Couldn't he have just like twisted one of the bumbling other family lords to do it? Because it's much better to be the vizier than the emperor.
Well, I think he wanted the chaos so that he had a mandate to make much more sweeping changes. Like, I think the idea was that it wouldn't just be another war between the 5 families and one of them wins and becomes the new emperor and things carry on much the same as before. It would have been, there is great dissent in our, population. The whole social structure of our empire has been threatened. So we have to make a whole bunch of big changes, one of which is we're going to make a big army and we can go. Like, it would have given him, this is my impression, was that he felt he needed that to make changes to do the things he wanted to do.
It's like when they use a terror event to increase surveillance on individual citizens, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So in some ways, that kind of commentary, and I think it's not clear because it wasn't a satire of what we would now consider it to be a satire of. But I think there is that in there. I think that's a definite part of it. Yeah. So but it gets more muddled as it goes on, because as the book goes on and his plans go off the rails, he becomes less and less competent. He just gets angry and insistent that people do what he says.
But he's a chess player as well. He should be thinking moves ahead, and he should also have contingency plans. Like, there's a whole thing about him being a chess player, so it doesn't quite make sense that he's just devolves. And so,
I guess the theory, or maybe the theme of the book that's trying to put that in there, is that chaos is what throws him off.
Yeah, so there's Rincewind throwing him off, all that planning to get him there, all the albatross he didn't send, all those sort of things, was that actually having Rincewind there completely destroyed his ability to play chess.
Which echoes the board game at the beginning, which is the meticulous winning games versus Lady Luck.
Yeah.
I guess. So that's...
I mean, the other thing that really throws his plans off is he has no idea that Genghis Khan and the Silver Horde are here at all. And then they've snuck into the palace, which is not what barbarian invaders do anyway. No. So not only are they there, they're not acting like themselves and taken over. And that's their theft. They don't want to steal money. They want to steal the whole empire because Khan's like, this is my retirement plan. Yep. Like, I want to have a whole empire so I can just sort of sit on a throne and you're like, that's weird, but okay.
But they did have that delightful conversation of like, oh, we'll just take the rubies and stuff and go. And then, But then he's like, oh, it's kind of like stealing from ourselves, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
And the tax guy is like, oh, but these vases are worth a lot of money.
Oh, I love that tax guy. When he's like, oh, I could be your tax guy. And he's already doing all the calculations in his head going, oh, yeah, no, like, those things would be reasonable expenses for a barbarian, like all of the, the drinking and the eating. And
right off one loincloth a year.
Yeah, it was great. I really like that. Having been through a similar experience with an arts accountant, like figuring out what is appropriate, I'm like, yep. I can identify with this.
The Age just published a tax calculator for different art. Yeah, they didn't have the arts. Didn't have barbarians either, I'm sure.
Terrible oversight.
Yeah. Who do they think reads The Age? Like it's barbarians and artists.
Like, it really is.
Oh, weird. But this is where sort of we get towards the sort of the last part of the book, really, is that this is where everybody's plans have been put into motion. Some of them have worked better than others. But I kind of really liked, well, I don't know if I liked it. I was in kind of two minds about the whole idea where Cohen and the Silver Horde realize that this isn't going to count. Like people aren't going to accept us because we haven't climbed to the top of this empire on a mountain of skulls and blood.
Yep.
And we need to make that happen. And Lord Hong is like, you're ruining all my plans. We'll destroy you. And he tries to rally all the troops.
He also tries to poison them, and that doesn't work very well.
Yeah, that was great. The poison. Although again, like that was him seemingly going, like it was way not subtle enough for him. And I think that was the first bit in the book where I'm like, what happened to the Lord Hong at the start? Who like is like making a sword and like sees the reflection of an assassin in the messenger's eyes, and like that's just the cool stuff. Like that was amazing. And then he just goes off his nut as soon as things are unraveled. And I'm like, that's not what I expected from this character. I'm a bit disappointed.
It hadn't really unraveled that much at this stage. It's unraveling, but it's not for someone who's meant to be in control and plotting to be like that.
It's kind of like how you make a sword by folding the metal a bunch of times, and it's like it's unfolding the other way.
Yeah. I don't know. Now I'm imagining what happens if you unfold. Now I'm imagining a sword that unfolds. Like that would be cool.
It would just be like a really sharp...
Turns into alfoil. That's what they make alfoil rolls out of old swords, and you know.
It's just like how they used to like make paper out of mummies.
Yeah, it's totally. It's exactly what they do.
Yeah.
Well, you ever find a print on your alfoil?
No.
It's a sword.
Old swords.
Is that why they're cursed?
Yeah.
That explains how I cut myself on them all the time.
Yeah, it's exactly that.
And why when you throw it into a lake, a lady throws it back? Like,
What, a roll of alfoil?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's white foil.
Oh, well, yeah, true. True. Yeah.
And that's the end of the episode. No.
We'll just leave it there with Hong unraveling.
And you can't unfold swords. Don't worry. I understand how you make a sword.
There is that whole thing about revolutions and how the counterweight continent does revolutions a certain way. It's very ordered and it's planned, and Hong's trying to do things differently, and then the Horde are doing the other way of a revolution, which is just attack everyone and take over. So they're kind of not doing it, and maybe that chaos has thrown him off. Or maybe I'm just trying to make up for his lack of character at the end.
Yeah, he does seem like a different person.
Yeah.
Like he seems a bit more like the guy from Going Postal, Richard Gilt. He seems like, because Richard Gilt's a bit like that, where he's so used to everything going his own way that as soon as it doesn't, he just gets a bit irrational and crazy.
Yeah.
Whereas Lord Hong is presented as someone who would never be in that position because he's always planning against people who are trying to kill him anyway. So it's...
And he would, like a person like that would have an escape hatch in your plan for if it went wrong. Like he'd be like, oh, well, okay, I'll buy my time and I'll do another plan. Like...
Yeah.
Because it doesn't have to be now. There's not like a now
and if
is the moment.
you've been plotting that long...
But this is where lots of things start happening in rapid succession. Hong challenges the Silver Horde. He's like we'll fight you, and we'll fight on the plain outside. That's where we always fight. We'll do it tomorrow. We'll see you then. And the Silver Horde are like, oh, there's like 6 of us, and, or 7, and there's a lot of you. And Rincewind has his idea, and I actually quite liked this because it talks about how he's not very good with weapons, at least not normal ones, and he's got an idea, and he's like, okay, I've got an idea, and he goes out and accidentally, in inverted commas, meets Dibbler again, the local Dibbler, or wasn't quite sure how to pronounce his version of the name. Dibbler, yeah, and says, yeah, no, look, I shouldn't be telling you this, but there's going to be like a whole horde of invisible ghosts that they're going to fight on their behalf. I mean, I don't think it's true, and it goes into great lengths about how that's the way you get people to spread a rumor.
There's 2,300,009. No, there's not, but yeah.
There's not like you use specifics and you tell them that you don't believe it, which means that people are like, wait, hang on, maybe I'm smarter than you and I know that it is true, and sows these seeds of dissent and worry in the armies. And I thought, that was great, and it does kind of work, but then Rincewind doesn't seem to tell anyone that that's what he's done, or he does, but then it kind of goes. It's weird because it happens so much on the enemy side, and there are other revolutionaries who are helping to stoke those fires. But then it doesn't. I don't know.
Doesn't he say it to Hung like at the beginning, and then he spreads the rumor? And I can't remember if that's in front of the horde or not. He's like, you've just seen the generals, but you haven't seen the army, the invisible army, something.
Oh yeah, something like that.
I'm not sure if that's like articulating his plan fully, and then he goes and spreads the rumors about it, which makes sense with his character because his strength is words, not.
Yeah,
it is incredibly clever of him, though.
Yeah, and look, it certainly has an effect on the armies, and then you have all those scenes where Hong's talking to the other noble lords. And insisting that they just do the fight anyway. And he's not like combating that. And I'm like, your whole plan was to foment a fake revolution. Why are you so bad at countering what is clearly a similar plan being enacted on you, where there's these rumors being sowed in order to destabilize your armies? Like you don't know how to do that. And his whole thing is deceit. So why doesn't he see it? So I was very confused by that, or at least how is he so easily undone? Like it's a very difficult thing to undo, as is a very relevant theme to our modern world, that it's very easy to put misinformation out there. It's much harder to get it back or to cancel it or say that's not correct. And so I guess there is that element to it, but he doesn't respond to it like that. He's just like, tell them to shut up or tell them to do this. And okay, they can put their fireworks off, but it's just to get everybody excited. It's not to scare away ghosts. Yeah. And it just makes things worse. But the army's still there and they're still going to show up to fight. So,
so are the sleeveys.
So are the
sleeveys. Sorry.
The sleeveys.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Okay. The army's still there. Yeah.
Yeah. And is it going to be a big fight? And as the time gets nearer, and the revolutionaries are like, "Come on, you can help them." He's like, "No, I already did what I could do. And there's nothing else I can do, and I'm going to run away because otherwise I'm going to die, and I don't want to die. So you guys can go out there and fight and die and believe that you're more likely to win." He has that great line. You think, "What do you think this is? Homeopathic war? The less of you there are, the more likely you are to win." I thought that was brilliant. But yeah, he goes.
It's got some killer lines around there as well about war and information. It's possibly his best bit.
Yeah, and I think having him there. Again, this is where I think he's at his most Rincewindiest. It's not just that he runs away all the time. It's that he is so aware of the stupidity of the things that happen in these kinds of stories. Yeah. And he's like, but I'm not having any part of it because that's not how it really works. And there's a lot of little commentaries like that, like when they're in the fighting and teachers like, "Oh yeah, I've heard that, war is a lot of waiting around and then little bits of action." And they're like, "No, it's mostly like lots of, being frightened and then dying." And you're like, "Oh yeah." There's a lot of those sort of reality checks on the tropes of big fantasy battles. But he wanders off. He meets up with the luggage again, who sheepishly has found another luggage and made some little luggages. Who's been missing the whole time, apart from a couple of little vignettes where it's
been busy.
Little couple of paragraphs here and there just to remind us.
Not enough, but yeah.
And then as he's walking off up the mountain, it starts to rain because all these quantum weather butterflies have flown overhead and caused this very localized, very intense and unseasonal storm.
Which is kind of the plot of the My Little Pony movie,
Is it?
Well, sort of like the flying ponies go over and they make the evil goo recede. But like, yeah, it's
Okay.
similar.
So the flying ponies pee on everybody? Is that what
No,
you're
I think
saying?
they just like flap their wings and the goo goes away because they're magic.
Wow.
It's been like 20 years since I've watched it though, so I
Okay.
could be remembering it wrong.
I don't
Maybe
know.
there is no My Little Pony movie. I don't know.
It's like that Shazam movie that doesn't exist. Yeah, okay, cool. But yeah, as he's walking away, and as the fight is beginning, they haven't started fighting. This is a big standoff, basically. And they decide they're going to parlay a bit, and then that doesn't really work. But Rincewind walks up the hill, falls through a hole in the ground because of the rain, and finds himself in this big cavern full of terracotta warriors,
Yeah, it
basically.
falls into the NGV. I was pretty
Yeah.
impressed.
Yeah.
I thought good timing by you guys at this podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This episode's sponsored by NGV.
No, there's no sponsorship.
Open now.
Although we have both been.
Yeah.
Is it good?
Yes. I got more out of it on reflection afterwards, I think. So, like, it wasn't like last year going to MoMA Cross NGV where you're like, wow, there's that famous painting, there's this. It's cool while you're there, and then the more you think about it, the cooler it gets,
Yeah.
I think. There is still, like, wow factor.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Slow burn.
They are awesome, and having seen them in the flesh recently, in the clay,
Yeah.
I had a very clear idea of what they might look like
Yeah.
in this book, because that's clearly what they're invoking. Even down to the fact that they were accidentally found by people digging in a farmland.
Amazing story. They're amazing. And I think it is, you can underestimate how amazing they are.
Yeah, and they still haven't finished excavating all of it, even though it was found in the 70s. There's
lazy.
estimated
Get onto
5,000
it.
of them.
Yeah.
And they haven't actually gone into the tomb of the actual emperor yet. That's still like all sealed up. So like that's a mummy movie waiting to happen.
Yeah, great.
Well, it was a mummy movie.
Oh yeah, that was terrible.
Yeah.
That was
How
so
many?
bad.
There was
That was
about
the fourth
12
one.
mummy movies, weren't there?
Well,
Just
they've made
Mummy Meets Little Pony.
Was it the
and-
third one with Jet Li in it? Was that the one?
No, fourth one with
Fourth
Jet
one
Li
with Jet Li.
and the Abominable Snowmen.
The
Oh, that was bad. That was so
And
I've
not
only
Rachel
watched-
Weisz, like she's just gone.
I've only watched the first two.
I think it's the fourth one, isn't it? So
Well,
the
it depends
first,
if you count the Scorpion King or not.
I don't count
That's
the
the
Scorpion King,
prelude,
but I
isn't it?
do rate the Scorpion King as a movie.
I must say, I'm really happy how much we talk about the 1999 Brendan Fraser starring The Mummy film on this podcast.
IMAX is doing it or has just done it or something.
It's a good
Yeah.
film. It rollicks along. It's a good
It's a great
Indiana
film.
Jones adventure. The second one, there's a whole lot of things I'm going, I don't think so.
But it's
The
still
first one is fun.
First one's a great film.
I
Yeah.
don't know. It's just silly fun.
As the third one, you're right, is the Abominable. I think I've just Indiana Jones it in my mind and been like, oh, the terrible one is the fourth one.
Did they
Is
make
that the
a
one when
fourth
he hid in the fridge when the atomic explosion? Is that the fourth
That's
one?
I think it's the fourth one.
Indiana
And
Jones
also there's
film,
like the crystal skulls and it's aliens.
Oh, it's so stupid. Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Like it's Nazis and aliens. Like
Oh, look, Nazis and Aliens is a great, that's a crossover we'll want to see.
Yeah, but we can watch Iron Sky for that. Like,
Yeah, or just read Hellboy or something like that. But
it
it's
doesn't
just,
have to be an Indiana Jones movie.
No.
No, it doesn't. But it was. Let's pretend it wasn't, though.
I do pretend it wasn't.
But to get back to Rincewind, he makes another reference which I enjoyed so much, where this is the secret tomb of the first emperor of the empire, and it's under this weird mound outside the city that gets commented on a few times. So
By
it
Teach
is,
especially.
yeah, so it is kind of seeded that there's something going on there. But then he only finds it by accident because he's walking away from the battle, and then he turns around and he sees the emperor's tomb, and then he sees the emperor's like sort of helmet and gloves. And there's all these warriors lined up. They're just like statues. He's like, that's weird. And there's all these strange globes in the ceiling that are being charged up by the lightning that is happening. And he puts on the helmet and he can see the back of his own head. So it's basically a virtual reality helmet.
Yeah.
And he puts on the gloves and these little icons glow up and he's basically playing Lemmings,
Yeah.
which I loved as a reference. And I found a great quote actually from Toke, because he was asked about this. And he kind of, jokingly, he said, "What, Lemmings? Merely because the Red Army can fight, dig, march, and climb and is controlled by little icons? Can't imagine how anyone thought that." And then he said, "Not only did I wipe Lemmings from my hard disk, I overwrote it so I couldn't get it back." I'm like, wow, he He really hated lemmings.
No, it sounds like he loved lemmings.
He loved it a bit too much. Like he played it too much.
Yeah, because like at school, we had it on all our school computers, and at lunchtime, everyone would like race in. Like you'd smash down your sandwich and you race in to be to get one of the computers so you could play Lemmings.
Because Lemmings is the basis of all tower defense games, basically, isn't it?
Well,
it's the
sort of.
unstoppable, the zombies versus plants, all those sort of things started there.
Sort of. There's not really any tower defense. You don't have any enemies. It's just about getting them to the exit.
Yeah.
So you assign some of them roles to control the other lemmings and make sure they go where they're supposed to go.
Your enemy is time.
And I found out last week it was invented in Dundee.
Really?
Yeah, Dundee's a city of design. In a meeting, at a UNESCO meeting last week, they said we invented lemmings. I went, you did not, liars. Just because you put it in PowerPoint, they did.
No, they did. Well, I didn't know it was them, but I did know it was a UK game.
Yeah.
So that's
Dundee's
cool.
done amazing things.
I really want to go home and play it now.
But they, it's good. There is a fairly recent mobile version, which isn't terrible, unlike a lot of
Don't tell me
mobile
that.
versions.
What a high bar it is. It isn't terrible.
No, it's actually pretty good. It just avoids some of the tropes of free to play mobile games that are maybe a bit annoying. But it includes some of them and avoids others. But
it's horrifyingly addictive, so I should probably not.
Yeah, don't do it.
Where do lemmings live?
Well, they don't.
They don't.
They just
No,
keep walking.
they
die.
are animals, aren't they? Are they real?
They are real animals.
Yeah.
And the whole thing about them walking off cliffs is not true.
No,
But where are they
it's not
from?
true. It's not an evolutionary forward step.
Well, it's because of a Disney film.
Yeah.
And I think actually we might have talked about this. It's in the show notes to an earlier episode because we talked about the ermines, one of the Discworld animals, which is clearly inspired by the idea of lemmings.
I'm just going to look up where lemmings live.
And I think they live in Europe
Because they're a mink kind of ferret.
Yeah, they're kind of
they're that
related
family
to-
of really vicious things that'll absolutely stuff you up if you put it down your pants.
Yeah. This is one where it's going to be.
Oh, they're cute.
I'm just going to.
Throughout temperate and polar regions of North America and Eurasia, inhabiting steppes, spelled Steppes, and semi-deserts, treeless alpine or Arctic tundra, sphagnum bobs, coniferous forests, and sage. These are just made-up words.
Now, sphagnum bog is really important for the environment. They dig up and put into garden centres. It's one of the worst resources to put into your garden.
Did anyone know that this is what they look like? They're very cute.
Oh, they're cute. They're little micey things.
They are very
They're not really
cute.
ferrets.
I thought they'd be like, I was imagining the computer game thing.
No.
Just
Well,
like
these are
hairless
game-
in some areas.
Well, they got green hair and weird sort of.
And they walk on two legs. It's not a documentary, Liz.
And I very
It's a
much do
computer
not
game.
want these to die. Like I
No.
don't think I could blow them up at the end of a level.
No, you wouldn't want that.
That'd be very deeply upsetting.
Everybody thinks that they would run off cliffs if they
Yeah.
weren't stopped, but that's because that was a myth, and it was propagated by a Disney wildlife film in which they kind of made a bunch of them run off a cliff.
Yeah.
And it's just it's a horrendous story. I'll find the details. I'll put it in the show notes for this episode if I can't find it.
Because
We
people
might
are
have
suddenly
played it before.
fascinated by the amount of wildlife talk I brought in. They got seals and sea lions, turtles and tortoises, lemmings, sloths.
Well,
they got
we
the
need-
closing speed of a cheetah. Things like that.
We need to know these things.
Yeah.
I love that in your summary of them, you added like 5 more things.
just chucking out weird stuff in my head. I really like the idea of things hidden in mounds, and I'll just bring it back to living in Salisbury where Terry Pratchett lived, and the whole barrows and stuff around Stonehenge, and the fact that there's a back road between Salisbury and Stonehenge, and you go there and you go on top of the hill and you can see all the barrows. And there's also that big hill. I can't remember what it is. I'm going to call it Spilsbury, but he's a guy I went to school with. All those things are what haven't been dug up, which are tombs.
All the barrows.
Yeah, and also hitting back to fantasy, Wheatstone and Brisingham and books like that, and that whole myth that King Arthur's living in a barrow and he's going to come back and be really disappointed with Brexit. Really dig it. I mean, it's the kind of fantasy muscle in me loves it.
Well, you have to dig it. It's underground.
Yeah, there we go. Set that one up.
Can I just quickly say also, it's kind of nice when they were talking about originally transporting Rincewind to the counterweight continent, that he was like, how are you going to stop me from ending up in a mountain or something?
Oh, yeah.
And he ends up in a mountain or something.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And he nearly gets stuck there as well because he
but-
puts the helmet and the thing on and then activates it, and then he can control the Red Army. And
Yeah,
this
the
is
Horde.
the original magical army made of
Yeah.
earth and powered by lightning, which they all think is a myth, but it's not. It's this incredible magical business. which
Yeah.
and there's repeated references to the idea that the Red Army will rise and fight on the side of righteousness, and he's like, no, there's no invisible or magical Red Army that's going to come and save you, and then he is the instrument by which that actually does happen. And the Red Army comes up out of the ground and they fight the armies of all the warlords and scatter them all because they're already frightened of the invisible ghosts, and now there's an actual Red Army coming. They win the battle by scaring everybody off and killing a bunch of people. And so the Silver Horde storms back into the palace to say, well, it's ours now. But then Lord Hong is not having that and goes in to confront them, which is when Two Flower taps him on the shoulder and says, hey, mate, like, do you remember a while ago you were having a skirmish and you incidentally killed a bunch of people? Well, I'm not very happy about that. And he doesn't, say, my name is Two Flower, you killed my wife, prepare to die. But he does a very polite version of that. And is about to fight him. He's clearly going to die because he's no good at it and refuses his daughter's like stepping in, even though they'd be much better at the job. And a barking dog.
Yeah, we get the payoff. He comes back.
Yeah, because they're trying to. And this comes back because they're just. Are they just sending it back, or they're trying to get
him back?
They're trying to get Rincewind back, but they can't do it because he's not in the right spot.
Yeah.
Or rather, no, they can do it, but there's this weird interference that the lady has done with the quantum with a butterfly landing on Hex to ruin the calculations. And so, they send the barking dog back, which was the plan, but it comes back and blows up or fires, obliterates Lord Hong, but also kills Teach, who by this time has taken on his true barbarian persona and found the life he was always meant to lead.
I just something just occurred to me. So the whole thing of Hex, you have to send something the same mass back.
Or similar mass,
Yeah, so Rincewind is as heavy as a barking dog cannon.
Or
is that luggage?
They said he was too heavy. It was heavier than him, which meant that he had too much momentum.
So that's it. Okay, good.
But I think, and I think so at their end, that's why they had the like mattresses and stuff piled up.
Yep.
But they thought they'd just send that back. And of course it doesn't really work. And that's why he piles through a snowdrift and smashes a bunch of people. Yeah. But that's so sad. I can't believe Teach died.
I was sad about that.
Should have been his book. It was his book.
But then he gets kind of a good rep because there is a cameo from Death earlier on.
Yeah.
And then...
As it always should be.
Yeah.
Best character ever.
Yes.
But he's like, Lord Hong's going to be off in the desert. There's some ghosts who want to see him. Meanwhile, we're going to take you over to your appointment, and there's a Valkyrie waiting for him because he's a barbarian now.
Yeah.
And he's turning around going, am I in the right place? And Death's gone. And he's like, I guess I'll just go. He's like, oh, maybe this will be good, actually.
Is there a library there?
Because it starts with evening classes. It's very funny.
Just going back to when I was dismissing the dramatisations of all of Terry Pratchett's work, and I think it was before we started recording, it's because some amateur theatre person always had to play Death, and they can never do it the way it is in our head. It's such an important character.
Very difficult to pull off.
And, obviously there's Death has been done in a million ways on TV, but Terry Pratchett's Death is a very particular Death, and you don't want, Jono, who, did Importance of Being Earnest last season, is now doing Death. Doesn't work.
I think it's because when you have a beloved character and if you have 50 people sitting in an audience that with 50 different views on what the character is like, you're probably going to disappoint all of them. And at best, maybe you'll make one of them sort of happy. I don't know, because it is one of those unfilmable novel kind of characters.
Sounds like crazy though. They had that period of time, and every Pratchett fan went because there was no dramatisations, just so little merch you could get, and it was so they'd go and they'd forgive it. They'd forgive it its faults.
Look, anytime you have Death and it's not the voice of Christopher Lee, you're just disappointed, aren't you?
Yeah.
But I'll be interested to see who they cast next, because in Good Omens, it's Brian Cox, not the astronomer, the American actor.
Yep.
And I thought that was a really strange choice.
It was a different sort of death, so I felt okay with that.
It is
not the death, it's a death.
Yeah, it's more sinister, kind of Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse death. So he's not the same guy. And then this is kind of the end.
No, you're skipping over the worst bit of the book.
Well, no, I haven't
deliberately. Maybe
I'm not stopping yet. But
people can read and discover it.
Yeah. Two Flower gets offered the role of being Grand Vizier.
Yep.
Rincewind is in the process of being offered, or they mention to him that he could be, start his own university.
Yeah.
But he doesn't get a chance because he suddenly disappears because this weird glitch in Hex's calculations has not meant that he's not going anywhere. It just means that instead of going back to the university, a third thing has been transported that splats into the wall at the university, which is kind of horrifying and gross.
Yeah.
And they can't quite figure out what it is, but they think it's kind of like maybe a giant rat or something. And then Rincewind ends up in the continent of XXXX.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
The continent of sneaky beer.
Oh, really, really not. It's just... Look, we're not a great culture, but do we really deserve this, this novelisation of us?
It's just so offensive in so many different ways in such a short period of time.
It's remarkably worse than the Simpsons episode.
Yeah.
That's how bad it is.
Wow.
It's a painful 4 or 5 pages.
But yeah.
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 It was
Just an awkward silence now. We just, here we go.
There
Let's
is.
not go. Let's remember
because
that.
it's got stereotypes plus like the worst of colonialism all merged into this.
What's the character?
I don't even want to think about it.
I mean, it's in the first 5 seconds that he's there in this book, he's like gets offered a boomerang and then he's like, I don't want your stupid stick. I don't want to be part of your adventures. And he throws it away. And of course it comes back and hits him in the head. And I'm like, you have to know how to throw those.
Yeah.
That's not how it works.
It's not going to happen.
It's
like that movie, and I'm not sure it wasn't a Brendan Fraser movie set in Australia with a giant kangaroo. Can you remember that?
I know
Kangaroo
the one you
Jack
mean.
It wasn't Brendan Fraser.
something?
Just
It wasn't Brendan Fraser.
But he was at the same acting school.
It was what's his name from Sliders?
Oh, it was so bad.
So
Jerry
Jerry O'Connell
Yeah.
in
come on.
Kangaroo Jack.
Well, you could have either. They're interchangeable.
I'll fight you.
What's Brendan Fraser do? He's got something new coming out, hasn't he?
He has, yeah. He had a long time off for very sad personal reasons.
There's a long article about it, which is good.
Yeah, but he's great, and I'm really glad to see him back. But look, that brings us to the end, though, of the book. I think we've kind of said how we feel about it as we go through.
It's interesting where it places in the momentum of reading them all for me. Like, it was the 17th, I read the first 16 really quickly. Like, I borrowed them from a friend. And this one, I think, when it came out, and you develop the muscle of familiarity, which you guys must have because you're reading them again, and this is me dipping back. But the first time I thought about it, I think there's a good book in there. It's just not quite working. And then you take away some of the lazy melding of cultures and, the whole barbarian who's so totally inappropriate, which we've avoided talking about, but is a bit of a stain on the book.
And is that how people felt at the time, first reading it, though? Or is this like looking at it through the lens of how far we've come in some ways? Because did it hold up momentum, or did it compare unfavorably with the other books at the time?
No, I enjoyed it at the time. This wasn't the ones that made me go, when I start skipping, and I think it's around about this, I started going, they're not all great. And I reckon I read the first 15 or so within months. I was ripping through them. I read the first 2 within weeks.
Yeah.
And it was just those things you're just waiting for. Same as you were talking before about series of Harry Potter. You wait for the next Harry Potter and your anticipation makes a book better than it'll ever be.
Yeah. Yeah, I read the first ones up to this fairly quickly. I paced them out a bit longer because of various practical reasons. But I think I read them all over the space of a year or maybe 18 months. And but I caught up to this, I think was, like I said, was the current one. Because I think this is the last one that I have in the paperback. And then I was working at a bookshop at the time, so I was buying them in hardcover as they came out.
Yeah, great.
Starting with, I think, Masquerade, which I think is the next one.
Oh, Masquerade's good.
Yeah.
Masquerade's really good. There's some really good ones around here.
Yeah. And I remember enjoying this because I really liked Rincewind and I was really happy to see him back. But I don't think I have ever thought back on it as like one of my favourites. But I do think there's so many really great bits in it that really kind of make, you wouldn't want to not reread it. I think you wouldn't skip it because there's so many good bits. And it then becomes part of Cohen's story, which we come back to later in The Last Hero. It becomes part of Rincewind's story, which we'll revisit when we get to The Last Continent. Let's not talk about that anymore right now. So I don't know. I think it's got lots of great bits that kind of save it a bit.
Yeah. And again, like just coming back that we didn't talk about the ninjas as well, which was quite good. Yeah, the examination scene I particularly loved.
Yeah.
because it was just very, especially the poem being written on his leg, because that was before Mulan came out, where she has the poem written on her hand, and then the lady grabs her hand and then draws a moustache on her face. So yeah,
it's around about the time that I reckon his writing jumped, and I reckon soul music is kind of seeing it, and the Guards books like Men at Arms is before this. I reckon his writing, he gets. I'm going to say craft, and that sounds incredibly insulting to him as a writer, because he could obviously write, and a very smart man. But observation was driving it for a long time, and parody. But I think satire came in, and I always reckon the Guards books are the ones where there's some of those books are so affecting and they're so clever, and the later books aren't as funny, but they're good books.
Yeah, they are good.
he picked up skills along the way, and they're showing through here.
Also probably ran out of things he could do parody and tropes on.
Well, I think he became interested in different things.
Yeah.
And you can see that even in the transition from the really early stuff into this period of writing, where he's already interested in different stuff than he was interested in when he started writing the Discworld books. But look, let's talk about a few of those favourite bits that I think kind of save the book, because I've got a few. Liz, did you have any?
I did enjoy that fluxes came up again in this, even though it wasn't a gross context, but I guess that happens, as in like a poopy context.
I liked quite early on. There's a line where he's describing the quantum weather butterfly for the first time, and he says that the wings are slightly more ragged than those of the common fritillary, which I thought was a very specific and weird word to use. So I looked it up, and it is the name of a particular kind of flower, and also the name of a fairly common butterfly that you'd find in Europe, not one that we have here. But I thought it was really interesting because the name supposedly comes from an Italian name or a Latin name for a dice box, because the pattern on the wings of the butterfly or of the lily-like plant resembles the pattern that you would get on dice boxes. And I thought, does that mean, like, does he do that on purpose because it's a quantum weather butterfly and it's rolling the dice? I mean, is that...
Yeah.
And I think surely. But then I also felt a bit sad about that, because I'm like, he did that much research on that, but somehow he did research... He didn't do enough research on...
There's the language things that might have been...
Maybe it's deliberate choice. Maybe there's a distance in generalisation that he wanted to keep.
Yeah, I don't know.
But there is, I think, that some of the language things that I talked about earlier aren't a coincidence. Like, I think there is a level of research that went into making those references have resonance that might not otherwise be picked up. But yeah.
I also really liked we get another glimpse into the work of Bloody Stupid Johnson with the place that they're using is the thing where the albatrosses can roost. Yep. And they're like, what is this place? And the patrician says, I've always understood that Mr. Johnson originally planned this to be a beehive. However, in the absence of bees 10 feet long, I'm like, yeah, that's great. I'm imagining this huge sort of dome structure.
Based on that architect, the English architect.
Yeah, on a real one. I think we have a note about him in one of the earlier episodes, but
that's so grim.
So good.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
So there were some good puns, like about glasses making a spectacle of yourself.
Yes.
And then he says portents, and he's like, oh, but like it's sort of like poor tense is another joke. But I did really enjoy when they do their toasts rather than quaffing, and they all have their different ones. So I can't even begin to say them, but... yeah, it's when the silver hoarder all quaffing pints, and it's just kind of nice moment of solidarity between them. So,
yeah, on that I also liked when they're talking about their different versions of the afterlife, and they're basically all different versions of the Viking afterlife. But they're all drawn from real mythology. It's like, I think we all get on this ship made out of the toenails of the dead, or we all we get picked up by a Valkyrie, or I thought that was kind of cool. I mentioned the homeopathic warfare one, didn't I? That was a good one.
Oh, there's
that was good
note earlier about like it's as much use trying to do this as asking something else, and one of them was like asking what sound yellow makes. I think it was a footnote, but
that's
what sound do you think yellow would make? It's a useful question.
A confused noise.
Yes, soft ping, like an elevator opening.
I guess I thought it'd be more mellow, but that could be just my rhyming.
No, that's blue.
So, and green.
Yeah.
Oh, and I quite like the bit where they're getting worried in the university. They're getting worried about Hex becoming intelligent. There's the bit where Ponder's talking to Mad Adrian, one of the other staff members in the high energy magic building, and there's a couple of great bits in there. He says, "You mean it's alive?" And then Ponder says, "Come on, let's not get all occult about this. We're wizards after all." And I was like, isn't that the whole job description?
Yeah.
Ponder also talks about the fact that you have to meddle a bit and then understand later. But also Adrian says, listen, you know that long problem in Thormic Fields you wanted me to put in? Yes, well, it gave me the answer at midnight, said Adrian, his face pale. Good. Yes, good. Except that I didn't actually give it the problem until 1:30, Ponder. You're like, what? But then he goes on to say, you got the answer before you asked the question. He said, yes, why did you ask the question then? Well, I thought about it and I thought maybe I had to. I mean, I couldn't have known what the answer was going to be if I didn't give it the problem. Well, good point. You waited 90 minutes though? I was hiding in the privy. Yeah.
There's no better word than privy. Privy is just a comedy word. Which
it is a good comedy word.
Brought back as a room at privy.
The other thing I really like is when Rincewind first finds the magic armour, perfectly normal magic armour. It had never been very popular in Ankh-Morpork. Of course, it was light. You could make it as thin as cloth, but it tended to lose its magic without warning. Many an ancient lord's last words had been, "You can't kill me because I've got magic." Ah! And I was like, yeah, that's very good.
Magic, your wife's a hippo.
Yeah. There's some great footnotes as well. One of my favourite ones is the one where they're talking about the fireworks bomb. And the footnote is, kids, only very silly wizards with bad sinus trouble do this. Sensible people go off to a roped-off enclosure where they can watch a heavily protected man in the middle distance light with the aid of a very long pole, something that goes, pfst, and then they can shout, hooray! I was like, oh, that was cute. A little like, hey, kids, don't do this at home moment. So those are a few of my favourite bits.
Did you have any favourite bits you want to
just that first bit back in Ankh-Morpork. It's probably because I was just watching Game of Thrones, so I was just having a visual reference to how bad a medieval city can be. And I was in a medieval town, so... And also the Terracotta Warriors and the callback to being the Golem, you just mentioned that, and it's one of my favourite stories, the Golem of Prague. So
oh, yeah.
It's really interesting.
And, of course, we get much more into that in Feet of Clay.
Yeah.
I
think that's probably why I like the Golem of Prague, is from Feet of Clay, so...
Yeah.
I dig them.
Yeah, cool.
Because they're buried.
Glad to help.
We did get some good questions. So, Liz, who we start with?
I just want to start more with a comment from our Discord from Zoe, who did also point to some of the issues that we discussed that helped shape our discussion today about some of the satirical issues. So I just thought I'd just do a shout out for that. This one's from Danny. Ideal casting choice for Two Flower, Pretty Butterfly, Lotus Blossom, Lord Hong, and the Emperor. So we don't have to do all of them because that's quite a lot. But if you have some choices, I think
this is a tricky question. I mean, I look. I do say I did like, and I've talked before on the podcast about how I haven't watched the Colour of Magic TV adaptation because they cast David Jason as Rincewind, and I just thought that was such horrendously bad casting because he's much too old and doesn't look at all like how I imagine Rincewind to look. So I didn't want to watch it. But they cast Sean Astin as Two Flower. And so instead of making him a parody of a Japanese tourist, they made him a parody of an American tourist. And so he's still wearing like a loud Hawaiian shirt and the hat and the glasses, but he's being very American instead of... And I thought, that's a clever way to turn it around. But it does mean you can't make interesting times because you can't make the counterweight continent full of Americans. But yeah, maybe you wouldn't want to. I don't know.
No.
Very weird, I thought. So I kind of like that, but that's hard things to do. None of them are old enough because I want to say Lucy Liu because I love her so much because I watch Elementary a lot and she's one of my faves. But she's not young enough for any of those characters. Although... You know what? You could cast her as Lord Hong.
Yeah. She would be an amazing Lord Hong. But not when... I wouldn't be able to buy her devolution of the plan later.
Yeah. But I think if you're adapting it into film, you'd probably change the ending, wouldn't you? You'd fix it a bit. And you'd probably... I mean, you'd take that opportunity like you would with any adaptation of something that's a bit older to knock the rough edges off it. And
you
to
throw
try
in
and
a
make it something...
event.
Yeah, a bit like, they did that, and I don't want to get into any spoilers because a lot of people won't have seen it yet, but they did that with a few of the elements of Good Omens that maybe didn't work as well in the book as they could have. Mostly it's very faithful, but the kind of extra stuff they add in, the couple of little things they change, I thought were really great.
You've got to change. It's different mediums. We're not looking for photocopies. That's the whole the world, and I think when people let that go...
But we're getting away from the topic.
Yeah, we're avoiding it really well.
Have we got any good casting choices?
I think this is a real comment on diversity casting in that there is like only a small handful of Asian actors in Hollywood that have recurring roles. Like there's lots of good ones, but...
I just thought of who I want to be Lord Hong, though.
Yeah.
BD Wong.
Yes.
I love him so much. He can do evil, like, because he's in Gotham and he plays the evil psychologist, does all the experiments on all the patients in Arkham Asylum. And he's a character from the comics, so he's quite a different version in Gotham. And he's so good. He's so good. I'd never seen him being evil before, and I just loved it so much. And Gotham is a very dramatic, cartoony, it's very melodramatic. In fact, it's very over the top, which is one of the reasons I love it so much. And he just does that kind of. He's like, "Yes, I will kill you all." Kind of. He does, and he would be perfect. Yeah. He wouldn't play it the same, but he could really nail it. I think he'd be great as Lord Hong. I'll put that in there as another one for sure. He's great. But you're right. That's why I was hesitating, because I'm like, well, I don't want to suggest any white actors. Although this does remind me, I did see a note, and this might give us a bit more of an insight into how much Terry was thinking about things, is that there's a line in the book where the samurai warriors, towards the end of the big fight sequence, are shouting things. And he wrote about it. He put some lines in there that are gibberish, that are meant to sound like Japanese, but he did it very deliberately, because when they were making World War II movies in Hollywood featuring Japanese characters as the antagonists, they couldn't hire any actual Japanese people to do it because they were all in internment camps, because this is a big horrible thing that happened during World War II. And so they roped in anyone who looked a bit Japanese, in inverted commas, most of whom were Korean Americans. And they didn't know how to speak. Yeah, and Mickey Rooney, but the less said about that, the better. And the story goes that since their job was to show up and get shot by John Wayne, that they just had to sound something that sounded a bit Japanese. And so someone on set, and this is the story, says, "Shout very fast, I tie your shoe, you tie my shoe," which they thought would sound like Japanese words. And so that's what they're shouting in the book in here. And it's a reference to these non-Japanese actors being forced to play Japanese characters and not knowing the language and making something up with the help of some Western people who, couldn't really care less as long as it sounded a bit weird. So he was thinking on that level, and he's put a reference to that in the book, which means that he is thinking on some level about that sort of stuff.
I've got one for Two Flower.
Oh, yeah.
And I can't remember the actor's name. The guy from Heroes.
Oh, yeah.
He's old enough now to play it. Yes. And he's got that innocent naivety, and you love him. As soon as he walks on the screen, you absolutely adore him.
And he does do that glasses pushing up thing.
He would be older, but also just screen presence.
His name is Masi Oka.
Yep.
He would be great.
He would be great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's and the daughters have to be new. They have to be unknowns.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to see, when you see the movie, presume you haven't read the book, you don't want to see a name character appear, because as soon as you see a name actor, you go, oh, they're important.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
All right. This one's from Kitty Hawk. What do you think of the scene where Rincewind is in Sator Square eating sausage in a bun and being inexpertly coshed by Thieves Guild trainees? My answer is I love it.
Oh, yeah. It was great.
Read a whole book of that.
The bunning scene.
Hey.
Yeah. It was nice to see the actual Thieves Guild in action. Like
sausage
training people. That was great.
Why do they call it that? Why doesn't Bunnings have it called it sausage in the Bunnings?
They should.
What's wrong with the world?
Quick, let's copyright it.
That's what the food truck should be called.
Sausage in the Bunnings. Yeah. And it should be green.
Yes.
Okay,
I'm not moving on the Lisa McCune poster, though. It has to have one.
Okay, all right.
Lisa.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe her and PJ from Blue Healers together.
Okay.
Just going deep Australia. Okay, but yeah.
Go on. What else? What else have we got?
What other questions have we got? This one's from Sven Uckerman, who sent us a lot of very good questions, so we're not going to be able to do all of them. But
thank you, though, Sven.
What is your favourite simple dish with pasta to feed several 100,000 to kill later? That's a very good niche reference. Like, just like a simple pasta dish because there's lots of them. I think just like pesto, because you can stir it through.
Yeah. And also, it's green and viscous, and you can't really see what's in it.
You can do a really easy one with mushrooms, some garlic, and cream. Really simple. Used to live on it when I was an artist of sorts. Very easy. It's garlicky, so you can hide tastes.
See, that's so much more sophisticated than I used to live on this thing, which is a can of minestrone, and if I was feeling rather hungry with some rice in it.
Yeah, I've done that. Yeah. Work in the arts. Yeah.
If you're feeling really gourmet, you can add some like spices to it while it's on the stove.
Fancy.
Yeah, I know, like bit of basil.
Spices are the condiments you steal from Hungry Jack's, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about? Salt and pepper.
Yeah. Look, I remember one of my versions of that was something I used to cook for breakfast, and I do like los huevos rancheros, but all it was just I just like scramble some eggs and tip some like salsa dip
fancy
in it. That was pretty good actually.
We've got a couple of good ones from Achu and Sneeze as well, so we can't do them all, unfortunately, but we did have a really good comment about Sir Terry doesn't swear very much, but it stands out when he does, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, and we noticed that in every book. I mean, in this one, there's that great bit where Rincewind is stuck in the armour and he's having to do the charades to tell them where he is because he can't speak through the golems. And he's doing the charades, and Two Flower works it out, and he says, oh, you worked it out. You understood wind. That was a really difficult one to do, that syllable. And he goes, yeah, but it was more when you started going, oh shit, I'm going to die, that we really figured out it was you. And I'm like, yes, that's a Rincewind thing to say. And it is one of the few times that he uses real swearing in the books. But I think it gives it that a bit more down-to-earth feel when he puts it in there.
Which other characters swear?
I think...
Is he the only one?
I think he's the only one who swears in this book. Like, I think in other books.
None are jumping out as
and look, you don't get much. It's basically just the occasional shit. That's really all you get.
But it's always a shock to the system. You're like, oh my goodness gracious me.
I mean, it's not much of a shock to us, I'm sure. I wonder if it's been bowdlerized in the American editions or whether they still say shit in there. I don't know. Be interesting to know. If you've got an American edition, let us know.
And if you've got the Swedish edition, can you check?
I don't know. Yeah. If is it the same in other languages? I don't know.
But Achu and Sneeze did send in this question/comment, which I thought was worth sharing. Is this the greatest description of Discworld magic ever? Magic isn't like maths. Like the Discworld itself, it follows common sense rather than logic. And nor is it like cookery. A cake's a cake. Mix the ingredients up right and cook them at the right temperature and a cake happens. No casserole requires moonbeams. No souffle ever demanded to be mixed by a virgin.
Yeah. It's very good. Yeah. I like that. I like that a lot.
We'll share some of Achu and Sneeze's other observations on the Twitter as well, because there's some very good ones in there.
Yeah, that'd be great.
This one's from Bryn. Do you think the depiction of Two Flower and Rincewind's relationship in the book is consistent with it as presented in The Colour of Magic in Interesting Times? Is this the only time we see Veterinary actually worried about the power of another country?
Oh, that is a good question. Yeah, well, it's not the only time. I mean, obviously, you've got some more direct worries, like, for example, in Jingo or in, and it's kind of at a distance because we don't really spend much time with him, but in Monstrous Regiment, that's kind of what's going on in the background. That's the reason for the war that's happening there. So there are other times, but this is the first time you see him doing state stuff that involves other countries. Also, there's the Fifth Elephant, I suppose, and where there's the whole mission to Uberwald and stuff. So there are a few other times, but I think this is definitely the first one.
Yeah.
What about the depiction of Two Flower and Rincewind's relationship? So do you think that's consistent?
I don't know. It's a good question.
They've been apart for so long that I think you buy that things aren't quite the same. But again, and this was something that Meg also asked on Facebook about the reveal of Two Flower and how we felt about it, and were we happy that we got more story for him. And I think, I've already talked about how I was a bit disappointed. And I think they spend so little time together, but it is nice that they have that friendship, because it's not often you see Rincewind with someone who he feels comfortable with. And he still is on edge because of the situation, but Two Flower is still very warm to him.
Two Flower is warm to most people.
Yeah.
That's true. A lovely man.
He is nice. That's why I like him so much.
Because it's a hero now.
Yeah, that's perfect. You nailed it. He's so good.
That's all the questions we have time for, except I do have one question of my own, so that's a bit sneaky. But
go on.
Did you tweet it?
No.
Yeah, we don't take it. Sorry.
I'm going to ask it anyway. I'm going to pull rank.
It's like rules of magic.
This one's a question for you, David.
Here we go.
If Ankh-Morpork was a city of literature,
here we go.
What do you think the guild would be like? Or would it have a guild?
That's an excellent question. So it would be like a guild of
writers. It's okay, you don't have to answer.
I know.
You really put him on the spot.
I just thought of it then.
All the guilds of Ankh-Morpork and which one would fit.
But the guild of writers would, I think, would be, because they've got a journalist thread throughout the thing. But
they do sort of have a guild for them at some point, don't they?
Yeah, and they talk about scribes occasionally.
But I just wonder what it would be like.
Are you suggesting it'd be another ineffective guild that only appears every now and again and we laugh at?
No, I would read the heck out of a book about the Writers Guild of Ankh. And I think he would have some great insights to add into like a book about the Writers Guild of Ankh-Morpork.
And they do have one of the greatest libraries on the disc. So
yeah.
And the spelling is all over the place. Like it's just...
let's just put our hands up and wave the librarian. the greatest literary figure in any literature.
Yes.
You know.
So he'd be a paid up member of the guild.
Oh,
He'd be high up on the board.
Suggesting that there's one guild. There's possibly a guild of writers, a guild of booksellers,
Guild of librarians.
you know.
And we know there is a secret society of librarians that meets on the Discworld.
And there's a secret society of librarians who meet in Melbourne as well, so that would work as well.
I have no doubt.
Yeah, I just made it up, and it's now official.
No. We had a librarian on the
works.
podcast, and she admitted that yes, she's been initiated into the secrets, but she can't tell us about them.
The whole glam librarian thing and the Cardi parties and things like that. There is. We're just out of them. So yeah, I'm sure there'll be many different guilds and ineffective organisations talking about each other.
Oh, that's great. Well, look, that does bring us to the end of the podcast, though. David, thank you so much for being a guest. If people want to find out more about Melbourne as a city of literature, how can they do that? So
cityofliterature.com.au, all the bookshops, libraries, writers, podcasts. There's a podcast page. And so there's a website calendar, what's going on. It's the one place you can find what's going on any night of the week, plus also highlighting all the things that happen in Victoria. You know, there's 32 regional writers' festivals in Victoria. So there's so much going on.
Amazing. Thank you so much
My pleasure.
for being a guest. We'd like to thank all of you listening. It really makes the work we put into Pratchett so worthwhile to know you're out there listening to us every month. If you'd like to help Pratchett out, you can support the podcast by reviewing or rating us in the podcast directory where you found us, like Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, or you can choose to support us monetarily via a donation or subscription. You can find out all about that on our website, pratchettpodcast.com. And existing subscribers, please note that the first bits of long-awaited exclusive bonus content are coming your way soon. Liz and I finally worked out how we're doing that, so keep an eye on your inboxes for more info about the secret Ook Club. We'll be back next month, as we are always, when we'll be reading The Unadulterated Cat, Pratchett's first non-fiction humour book dedicated to the idea of the real cat, written all the way back in 1989 in collaboration with cartoonist Gray Jolliffe. If you have questions about The Unadulterated Cat, send them to us via social media using the hashtag Pratchat22. Yeah, it's going to be great. And we're going to have a great time reading it. But until next time we come back, hopefully you will live in interestingly less pan-Asian cultural mishmash times. But watch out for those quantum weather butterflies. Don't tread on them. You've been listening to Pratchett, the monthly Terry Pratchett Book Club podcast, with Pratchetters Elizabeth Flux, Ben McKenzie, that's me, and guest David Ryding. Pratchett is produced and edited by me, with music by David Ashton of Sample and Hold Studios. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook at Pratchett Podcast, and listen to past episodes and support the production of new ones via pratchettpodcast.com. Join the conversation for this episode using the hashtag Pratchat21.
Pratchett is brought to you by Splendid Chaps Productions. We make entertainment for your ears, like the time travel comedy series Night Terrace. To find out more, visit splendidchaps.com.